Hello everyone, what's up? It is time for the Skyward Sword any percent tournament for the winners bracket round 2. Facing off today we have Deesh versus Chimera, and on commentary we have Extra and Inikanobo. These two know way more about the game than I do, so I will pass it off to them straight away.
Much and welcome to this winners bracket race. This is actually Deesh's second race of the tournament, while Chimera got a bye as the second seed. So this will be Chimera's first race. It's a 2 versus 7 matchup, but Deesh has improved his PB quite a lot lately, so these are two well-matched runners, and I'm excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, we should have a pretty good race here today. Looks like it'll be pretty even, so hopefully we can have a pretty tight ending.
Now you can tell already that Deesh will be playing on the English version while Chimera has the Japanese version, so this will give Chimera about a 8-minute advantage from text speed. So Deesh will have to play that much better in order to make up for that deficit. Looks like we're about to get started here. And they're off.
You know, one thing I really like about Skyward Sword is that 20 seconds in, you're already playing the game.
That is true. The ability to skip cutscenes is one of the main reasons that our races are done on hero mode.
Yeah, Chimera having a bit of nunchuck troubles there at the beginning.
Yep. But we've connected and we're off to the races. So it's interesting, Chimera's talking to Fledge here at the beginning. This is going to set a flag to allow him to do some tricks later on. And you can already get a taste of the text difference. Deesh did not talk to Fledge at the beginning, but all through this first Skyloft segment, where a lot of text is there to teach you how to play the game, Deesh is going to be losing ground just due to the text speed.
Yeah, even with the little nunchuck malfunction at the beginning, Chimera will probably be able to pull ahead just in text at the beginning. Because absolute massive difference between English and Japanese.
Yeah, as someone who runs the English version myself, I have accepted this deficit, but it's still very sobering to see the two text speeds side by side like this. All right, so our runners are going to start out by visiting Zelda, and then the fun is going to start almost immediately. We're going to see a glitch called the back in time glitch, where by dying and choosing to continue your game and then immediately resetting, you are able to gain control of the link that is on the title screen. And on its own, this is not particularly useful. However, it does allow you to manipulate file data at the same time as moving around. So the combination of those two abilities leads to some pretty broken stuff later on.
Specifically, the ability to load and save at the same time, because Twilight Princess and Wind Waker both have back in time, but you can't load and save at the same time. In Skyward Sword, you can, and it just creates some absolutely mind-blowing potential.
All right, so the thing about back in time is you have to die in order to activate it. So both of our runners have saved at the lower academy statue and will be dying as quickly as they can by throwing themselves off of a cliff, with some continued nunchuck trouble here for Chimera.
Yeah. Hopefully that doesn't happen throughout the entire run.
All right, so Deesh has activated back in time. This first back in time, there's going to be a couple things we're going to try and do. The first thing he's going to do is copy file 1 to file 3. This will be extremely temporary because he'll be deleting file 3 and then saving while the deletion is happening. And this will essentially save an empty file. There will be no data associated with this file, no name, no anything, but in particularly no health. So loading this corrupted file will cause Link to die immediately. And this is helpful early on for activating bit when we don't have another convenient way to do so.
Yeah, thankfully there's still position and map data though. because without those, you actually wouldn't be able to. You just fall infinitely, or no, you can't die into the void in this game. So it would
Yes.
still work. Never mind. Never thought about that until right now.
Well, in any case, Deesh is now headed for the last part of this bit in the goddess statue. He's going to be grabbing the goddess sword and then charging a skyward strike, and he's going to be starting his file immediately as the skyward strike finishes. This is our first example of what's called reverse bit magic, or RBM for short. And you're going to be hearing a lot about that during this run. The short form is that by modifying a flag during back in time, after you have started a file, that file's flags have already been loaded, and the action you take in back in time during the fade out changes one of those flags. And you can then make that flag permanent and essentially change things about your environment depending on what flags you set.
Yeah, the practice sword RBM in particular is relatively straightforward because you RBM the practice sword and you actually get the practice sword, because that's there's only one flag for that. But later on, when there's shared flags between maps, things are going to get pretty crazy.
Yeah, right now everything's on Skyloft, so it's essentially a one-to-one thing. Whatever you do during back in time will do the same thing on Skyloft. But the game reuses the same sort of array of flags for different areas, and so a flag that might be bonking into a tree on Skyloft might open up a door in a dungeon later on. That is a completely made-up example. But we'll have some more concrete ones as we progress through the run.
Yeah, there will be some door opening.
So I'm a little interested in what Deesh is doing here. It looks like he's redoing the Goddess Sword RBM. I guess he thinks he failed it the first time.
Yeah, you won't actually be able to tell if you got the Goddess Sword RBM until you go and talk to Groose. So
yeah, one of the properties of RBM is that when you change a flag, it won't immediately take effect until you commit that flag. So you have to make some sort of other alteration to your environment in order to make the RBM flag you wrote in be permanent. And that's true for most RBMs. So right now, even though it looks like Deesh doesn't have the Goddess Sword, once he talks to Groose here, after the cutscene, because we've reloaded the area, it should show on his back.
it's actually true for all RBM flags, but some areas reload flags every time you load in, or update flags every time you load in.
I think Elden Volcano is one of those areas, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
All right, so Deesh doing the RBM twice has given Chimera quite a lead now. Slashing the ropes there is actually much harder than it looks because the sword likes to auto-target the barrels, which are next to the ropes. And
likewise, the cave that Deesh is going into right now is also a lot harder than it looks. The movement in there, you can lose probably up to 10 seconds, I'd say, by having some sloppy cave.
And it's a nice way to sort of talk about one of the major underrated aspects of this run, and that's stamina management and just movement in general. Link has a stamina wheel which depletes as he's sprinting, and one facet of that wheel is that the last quarter of it drains more slowly than the rest of the wheel. And so if you're using stamina to sprint over long distances, it's actually faster to use up almost all your stamina, then let it recharge a quarter of the way, and then use up that last quarter as many times as you need.
Yeah, the last quarter regenerates at the same speed as the rest of the wheel. So you can kind of effectively get twice as fast stamina regen.
And one thing that separates the good Skyward Sword runners from the great Skyward Sword runners is movement. The great Skyward Sword runners have pretty impeccable movement. Rolling is, I think you gain roughly a frame each time you roll, so You'll see people rolling as much as possible and maximizing the use of their stamina wheel in all instances.
It's kind of funny. One roll saves an average of 1 frame. It can either save 0, 1, or 2 frames, and bonking takes, what, like a second and a half? So
Something like that.
90 rolls makes up one bonk. And when you think about it like that, rolling is probably not worth it for the most part.
It's only worth it in wide open areas where there's no risk of bonking.
Yes. Which is also, unfortunately, when it's not very useful, because just rolling itself, you only want to roll when you have more stamina than you need to just run to a given area, or else it's actually slower to roll.
Yeah, rolling uses up more stamina than sprinting. So you want to roll when you can, but you also want to not overuse stamina. All right, so Chimera is about to do the practice sword RBM, which is a little bit different than the goddess sword RBM. And it's not that we need the practice sword, but this flag we're about to set by getting the practice sword during Back in Time is used to trigger a cutscene during Back in Time that enables 2 other RBM tricks later on. And this is actually quite precise. It's a good example of how tricky RBM can be to do well. You have to have certain files selected at certain times. So if you open that chest with something other than the corrupt file selected into bit's memory, then the RBM won't work. If you open file 1 too soon, the RBM won't work. And sometimes when I say don't work, I mean your console hard locks and you
Yeah.
have to unplug it from the wall in order to reset it.
That one in particular is very, very easy to crash. I actually thought he was going to crash there, but thankfully he didn't.
Yeah, he got through that well. And so he's now placing the Emerald Tablet. That RBM was combined with what's called a bit save. By saving your run file at a statue in Back in Time, when you reload that file, you will be on Skyloft again. So that's used occasionally in combination with other bit tricks to travel quickly back to Skyloft. In this case, it's used to skip the wing ceremony and obtaining the sailcloth. And that saves a good 2 to 3 minutes, depending on your version. Deesh is doing the practice sword RBM now. You'll notice that after that save, he copies file 1 to file 2. This file is going to serve 2 purposes. The first purpose is that it has flags set which allow us to open the gates to the academy during Back in Time by bonking into a tree. The second purpose is we're going to set up file 2 in such a way that it will allow us to access the sky during Back in Time, and that's going to enable some of the more crazy tricks later on.
I don't think we ever do night Back in Time, do we? Oh no, there's one instance in Elden.
Yeah,
we also need an early game file for that, because Back in Time will actually crash if you try to... Back in Time really doesn't like the hero's tunic. So for some Back in Time things or tricks, it's quite important to have a file that doesn't have the hero's tunic so that you don't crash. And that'll be one of those things.
That is a good point. That is yet another purpose that second file serves. And in general, file management is very important over the run because we need specific flags set to do specific RBMs. And so we copy files at specific places so that we have those flags available to us when we're in Back in Time later.
If Skyward Sword had a 4th file, I'm pretty sure basically every single route for this game, every single category would be completely different. Especially
true.
100%.
Yes, especially 100%. Because ideally in 100%, you would do many, many RBMs, but you only have 3 files to work with. So to some extent, you have to pick and choose which ones to do. In any percent, there are, in some senses, fewer RBMs that would be necessary. And so we 3 files are sort of enough to do everything we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
So over on Chimera's stream there, he did a skydive into the Farron Pillar. That skydive skips a text where Phi pops up and tells you about the map. And it's a little bit faster to skydive there, even though skydiving is generally slower than flying your Loftwing, just because you don't have to listen to Phi talk.
Not actually very much faster. I think it's only about 4 seconds faster.
If you're on the Japanese version.
On Japanese, yes.
Yes. So this is actually an important thing to mention about the version difference. It's not necessarily just text speed. because text speed can also affect whether certain tricks are faster or not. So for instance, the Skyloft route you just saw for both of these runners was generally called the safe route, where you create a corrupt file and you use that corrupt file to do a back in time after freeing your Loftwing. That route is slower on the Japanese version. It's actually faster to, if I remember right, get the practice sword normally and then do a 2-frame window cutscene skip right before what would be the wing ceremony, and then you can activate bit manually.
Yeah, if you don't manage to land on one of those 2 frames though, you do lose multiple minutes, so that's why the safe route is called the safe route, because you don't have to risk losing multiple minutes. And I think it's about 30 or 40 seconds slower, so it's not too massive of a time loss.
The funny thing is, because of English text differences, the safe route is actually faster on English. Because one of the things the safe route skips is all of the text boxes that are associated to getting the practice sword normally. The sparring hall captain talks to you a couple times. There's a whole cutscene with a Sheikah stone outside the sparring hall where it tells you how to get video hints. And all of that text on English adds up to just enough time that it's a couple seconds faster to do the safe route on English.
Yeah. You can also see here on Chimera's screen that we don't have the sailcloth, so when Link tries to pull it out, he just does the SRM pose.
Yeah. It's not actually SRM though.
No, it's not SRM. It's just because there's no sailcloth there. It's how Link would hold the sailcloth, but the sailcloth just isn't there because you don't have it.
You'll notice on Deesh's stream, he actually pulls out the sailcloth, but that's during a cutscene. So essentially, when you're landing in an area, you have the chance to press the B button to pull out the sailcloth. But if you don't do it, then Fi automatically deploys the sailcloth for you to save your life. And so you can see the sailcloth during cutscenes, even though we don't actually have it. So another important aspect of Skyward Sword speedrunning, we've talked about stamina management, we've talked about file management, there's also health management. And because most of our major tricks are centered around back in time, which requires dying, generally speaking, it's best to be on as little health as possible. Since this run is done in hero mode, most things deal 2 hearts of damage to Link. And so being on 2 hearts is generally the right range for where you want to be. So we take damage jump slashing into this pit that Deesh is in just because we don't have the sailcloth, but it's actually pretty convenient because it puts us on 2 hearts, which helps us do these bit tricks more easily.
A natural consequence of that, though, is that you're basically always 1 hit away from dying. So any little mistake and you can die, which, as you would probably expect, an accidental death is a massive time loss, especially in some places later on, or not necessarily in this run, but certain deaths in other runs can be up to 4-minute time losses. Unintentional deaths.
Yeah, so there's a very important distinction between an intentional death, which may save 4 or 5 minutes, and an unintentional death, which might lose 4 or 5 minutes. Yes. So you really have to be pretty precise, and it's possible to play things a little safe and have higher health in certain places, but then dying for back in time is just a little bit slower. So different runners, depending on their experience and how risky they want to be, will choose different health options throughout the run.
Yeah. On Chimera's stream, we just saw the first instance of how incredibly overpowered the Skyward Strike is in Hero Mode. So in Hero Mode, the Skyward Strike is always the Skyward Strike from the true Master Sword. And so that deals way more damage than the Goddess Sword, so we're going to use it in the early game and even in the end game a bit, because it really does an incredible amount of damage. It kills Bokoblins in 1 hit, so we'll see it a lot during this little slingshot segment here, for multiple fights.
I think if I'm remembering right, the Skyward Strike right now deals 4 times as much damage as actually hitting something with your sword.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So it does one-hit these Bokoblins, and so a lot of fights in the early game are going to be collecting a bunch of Bokoblins into one small spot so we can hit all of them with a Skyward Strike.
Yeah, and it's piercing too, of course. So it goes through multiple Bokoblins, which is kind of really where the power comes from.
So if you're familiar with the game, the normal mode Skyward Strike is fairly unimpressive. It doesn't deal a lot of damage, and it's pretty small and doesn't have a lot of range.
It also charges really slowly.
Yes. So the upgraded one that we start with in hero mode charges more quickly, does more damage, as we mentioned. It also has more range, and that might be important if the runners miss Extending Blow, which is coming up here in Deep Woods. There's a backup strat called Cube Warp, which only works on hero mode with the extended range of the Skyward Strike.
Deesh very carefully placing that beacon. Impa asks you to place a beacon, and if you're not right on the X, then you got to do it again, and it loses an embarrassing amount of time.
It's a really embarrassing amount of time on English, too.
Yeah, failing some things in Skyward Sword that don't save much time are pretty sad because you end up losing a lot of time from it, and then also often is the case where you get a really long cutscene to think about how silly you are.
It's
like
a risk
falling
reward.
off of Skyloft, for example.
Yes, that's a particularly embarrassing one because the knight places you back on Skyloft and then gives you a little lecture about how you should be more careful with what you're doing, and you just have a minute to think about
Like
what have I
15
done?
seconds.
Yeah. Generally speaking, there's risk reward to any trick you try in a speedrun, and in a race setting, you might be a little less risky. So some of these little minor things that might save 1 or 2 seconds, maybe runners decide not to go for them just to be a little more consistent.
Skyward Sword generally, though, is a high-risk, low-reward game, which is kind of funny. So, for example, being on low health all the time, it really doesn't save that much time. It only takes an extra couple of seconds, and then if you do accidentally die, you can lose multiple minutes.
Yeah, but we do it anyway because, gotta go fast.
Yeah, because speedrunners are crazy.
That's for sure. Speaking of crazy and English text differences, there's actually a trick in Elden which allows you to skip the digging mitts. You can do a bit warp, and it was known about 5 months ago, and it's slower on the Japanese version. But I tested it yesterday, and it's actually faster on the English version by about 8 seconds.
I think, though, I don't think anyone has ever gotten it RTA on a console, though. Could be wrong about that.
I think we're thinking of different tricks.
Okay. Which one are you thinking of?
So there is a bit warp with the Lower Academy statue, which lands in lava, which is like right next to a ledge. And if you are in just the right position and have just the right frame, you can backflip out of the lava onto the ledge.
Yeah, it's a one-frame trick.
However, I think only one person's ever gotten it, and it was on emulator.
Yes.
I don't think anyone's gotten it on console.
That's the one that I was thinking of.
Yes. There's an alternate bit warp you can take using one of the Farron statues. And that is significantly slower because, as you'll see later on, it takes a while to get to Farron and back in time. But it lands you out of bounds, and then you maneuver out of bounds over to the Volcano Ascent statue and skip it that way. But it's only faster because of text differences, and it's that kind of thing which can kind of drive you crazy.
Oh, a couple more nunchuck malfunctions with Chimera.
That's a particularly bad place to have a nunchuck malfunction because you were trying to gather all these Koblins together.
Yeah, we mentioned dying losing a lot of time. Dying here would lose a very large amount of time. I don't think it would quite put him behind. He has built up quite a bit of a lead over top of Deesh right now, but it would definitely put them close to each other.
Yeah, and this segment at the beginning, we mentioned it on Skyloft, but it continues into Farron. There's a lot of text at the beginning, so Deesh is losing ground every single text box that appears.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this whole segment is pretty standard. We're rescuing the Kikwi's in order to obtain the slingshot so we can go deeper into the woods. Once we get there, things will get more crazy.
Theoretically, you can get to Deep Woods without the slingshot, but even if somehow you did manage to get another item, the game will actually crash. Because the slingshot doesn't just unlock the slingshot, it actually unlocks the ability to equip items as well. And, well, equipping items is pretty important in Skyward Sword, so definitely need to be able to do that.
Yeah, we can't yet beat the game with no B items. It's possible to beat the game with only 3 B items. And I guess it's actually technically possible to do it with 2. Actually, maybe just one. You might only need the slingshot. But the fastest route for most runners will get 4 B items. The slingshot is the first one. It unlocks the B wheel. And then we'll get the beetle in Skyview. We'll get the bombs in Earth Temple, and we'll get the whip in Ancient Cistern. So if you know the game and you paid attention to my list, you'll realize that we're not going to get the claw shots, and we're not going to get the bow, and we're not going to get the gust bellows, and all 3 of those B items are in Lanayru.
Yeah, Lanayru is going to be very interesting if you've never seen it. Don't blink.
Yeah, don't blink. You'll miss it.
Well, I actually completely forgot about this log in 80%.
Yes, that log will be important in about an hour.
Yeah, that's one of those. There's a lot of tricks in Skyward Sword where if you forget, you probably won't. You'll notice that you golded, which is kind of suspicious, but you won't realize until up to, potentially hours later where some trick just doesn't work and you lose massive amounts of time.
The most infamous of these is probably Song of the Hero skip, which is a trick you do about halfway through the run, but you don't know if it works until the very end.
And yeah, there's absolutely nothing to tell you. No cue or anything, nothing to check in the inventory screen.
You can kind of, if you know the trick well enough, you can kind of tell as you're doing it if you got it or not, but you can't ever be sure until you actually get to the end.
Yeah, until you're standing in front of the door trying to go to Horde and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Although thankfully you can just redo it, I believe.
Yes, it's possible.
There are some instances of tricks where, for example, I think we'll actually see one in this run where if you fail it, or no, not in this run. Yes, in this run, where if you fail it, you don't have and you don't notice, you don't have the opportunity to do it later. But that thankfully is not one of the tricks, so you can just retry it.
Yeah, you can just retry it, but the trick itself takes about 3 to 4 minutes to do, so it's a significant time loss.
Back in Time in general is actually quite slow. There's a lot more things that we could do with Back in Time, but not only just losing all of your health, the cutscene of Link dying, the cutscene of Link falling off of Skyloft and landing on Skyloft, and then actually going to do what you want to do in Back in Time. Even just getting into Back in Time, I think, is about 45 seconds to a minute typically. And then if you want to get into Farron to do things, it's multiple minutes. So Back in Time is actually quite slow. So it's really only useful for skipping very large things.
Yeah, so as an example of that, it's possible to use RBM and Back in Time to skip the whip completely in Ancient Cistern, but it also makes the dungeon 3 times longer.
Yes.
Alright, so Chimera has his slingshot. He's headed to the Deep Woods. So the Deep Woods has a trick in it called Extending Blow. This trick is one of the cooler looking tricks in Skyward Sword. It's also a very good example of how Skyward Sword tricks worked before Reverse Bit Magic, in that it seems really cool, but it really only works in this one place.
So the way that it works is you do a final blow on a Bokoblin, but you do that as the Bokoblin falls into the void. And so really, I guess simply what happens is the game doesn't know where to send you, so it sends you to 000, which in Deep Woods is a really nice spot, because that's where we're trying to go. And it also skips a bunch of cutscenes and some other tricks. Yeah. So it saves quite a bit of time if you can get it. Unfortunately, though, it does have some randomness. The amount that the Bokoblin gets knocked back when you do a spin attack is random. And so it feels like it only works about 30% of the time. I don't think anybody's ever done any real testing on how often it works.
I've heard 1 in 3 and 1 in 4. But the key to this trick is having the Bokoblin land on the very edge of the ledge. That tricks the game into thinking the Bokoblin is dead, but still allows you to target it. And that's what sends you towards the origin.
Yeah,
and
so Chimera there had a high knockback. So if you do have the opportunity to get it, the Bokoblin will still bounce off the ground, but you'll still be able to do the final blow.
Yeah. So Chimera is going to backup strats now, which is the cube warp I mentioned earlier. We're going to manipulate this Bokoblin into a certain position, and then charge a Skyward Strike. And if we shoot it off at the right angle, we'll hit the cube up on the ledge. So that was 1 miss. You get 3 tries at this because it takes 3 Skyward Strikes to kill the Bokoblin.
3 hits of the sword.
Yeah, my mistake.
Oh, an accidental death. So if you swing late, or if I guess you make a little mistake and the game doesn't register, the Bokoblin, of course, will hit you, because you do have to wait for the Bokoblin to start attacking before you do the swing. Because not only do you have to do the right swing, but the Bokoblin has to not block it. And so that can only happen when the Bokoblin tries to swing.
Yeah, so Chimera's going to reload this area. I think he's going to be trying to reload the Bokoblins to take another shot at Extending Blow.
Hopefully we can see it. This trick is super cool. Oh, nunchuck problems.
He's having the nunchuck problems, so he's not going to have...
Ooh.
I think that was a little bit short. He landed a little short of the ledge, so that didn't quite work for him.
And had a camera angle. The camera was over Link's left shoulder, which is not the camera that we're used to there.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Deesh has collected his slingshot, so he'll be heading to the deep woods as well. I think Chimera is having some significant calibration issues here.
Yeah, started deciding to douse. Not fast, believe it or not. Although still ahead. It's a Japanese version.
Honestly, he's also had a pretty solid run up until deep woods here.
Yeah. Back in time, simply it allows you to manipulate files in a really interesting way. So it allows for a lot of things that would take a very long time to explain, and there's no really concise thing that you can say Back in Time does in particular.
I think the best way I can put it concisely is that you can mess with your file data in different ways. That can be... There he goes again. So I think Deesh is going to be catching up here.
Yeah, it looks like we're gonna be tied here in a second. Deesh might actually be ahead because he's only got 2 hearts and Chimera will be at 6.
Back in Time in this game is difficult to learn, but once you get the hang of it, it makes sense. And it's much more flexible than the corresponding glitch in either Twilight Princess or Wind Waker.
Yeah, the ability to save and load our files at the same time really creates some crazy tricks.
Alright, so this is Chimera's 3rd try at Extending Blow here.
Yep, got the right camera this time. Oh,
And
bit of a far bounce. Yeah, and Twilight Princess, I'm pretty sure, just does the, you pretty much just copy the file select screen. File.
Yeah. Deesh also misses Extending Blow.
Looked like a little bit of a short bounce there.
Yep.
Hey!
Alright. There's the cube warp. So the reason cube warp works is because this is the first goddess cube you're supposed to get. And interestingly enough, the game has coded it so that if you do not get this goddess cube, you can't actually hit any of the others. You can walk up to one and hit it with a Skyward Strike and nothing will happen. Alright, so Chimera just did a trick there where he did the jump slash out of a jump off a ledge. That gets him just over a trigger, which causes Fi to talk to you about how there's a dungeon here and dungeons are dangerous and you shouldn't be cocky.
Yeah, and she tells you to get a shield and potions and stuff. It's actually quite a long cutscene. It's about 40-45 seconds on Japanese.
Yeah. And Deesh got the same skip, so we're pretty even heading into Skyview Temple here.
Yeah. I think we're about to see the infamous "you will not be able to track her here" line in English. Oh! Chimera didn't save.
He is probably going to damage down to 2 hearts and then save.
Ah, yes, yes.
But yes, I noticed that too. I guess he's decided 4 hearts is sufficient.
Oh, no, he's taking the keys with him.
So that's the other downside to dying unintentionally. It resets your health to 6 hearts. And 6 hearts is a lot of hearts. So Deesh is going to take the lead here just because he can die more easily to this keys. And believe it or not, the keys is the fastest way to die here as long as you only have 2 hearts. So the trick we're doing here is what's called a bit warp. And a bit warp is one of the first bit tricks that was discovered. We're going to maneuver to a specific statue during Back in Time, and we're going to both save and start our file at the same time. And the effect of this trick is to load you into the map you were saved on, which in this case is Skyview Temple. but load you there with the coordinates that correspond to where you were standing back in time. And so we're heading to the Upper Academy statue here. Those coordinates correspond with the large round room at the end of Skyview Temple. So this particular bit warp skips both small keys in Skyview Temple and saves around 6 minutes.
Yeah, kind of the order of operations for a bit warp is you start the save and the load at the same time, and then basically immediately it saves Link's position data, and then the save gets interrupted by the load, so Link's position data changes, but the game doesn't have a chance to save Link's map data. And so your position data changes, but your map data does not. And thankfully, I think all dungeons have some kind of central area that's always loaded. Because if this area was unloaded, then we would just infinitely fall into the void.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, this dungeon has just one area, so it's always at least partially loaded.
Yes. Any black screen will load a new area.
Yeah. So it's partially loaded, but not fully loaded. So one of the reasons we're going into this room with the Staldra here is that we want to reload the area because certain actors are missing. For instance, the rope leading to the boss here is missing when you first load into Back in Time. And the reason we go through the Staldra door is so we end up on the other side of this gate that Deesh just opened. That allows us to skip the second small key. You'll also notice that both Chimera and Deesh broke some wooden boards after killing the Staldra here. That sets certain flags, which are going to be helpful during Back in Time later on. We are going to actually copy a file that is saved in Skyview Temple over to file 3, and we'll be using that for different parts of the run moving forward.
Ooh, Chimera with a bit of a scary spider. That spider is the bane of every new runner's existence.
Yes.
That spider is surprisingly difficult to get past without getting hit.
In casual play, you're supposed to have the beetle at that point, but because we did this bit warp, we don't yet have the beetle. And in fact, we have to go backwards to get the beetle. So that spider has eaten every runner at least once, including me.
It's right as the game starts to pick up, too, so you have to do the kind of boring part, if you will, the first cycle of Skyward Sword over again.
And a death there actually wastes a lot of time because it will put you back at the beginning of the dungeon and you'll have to redo the bit warp trick.
Yeah, and then if you forget to save before you redo the bit warp, you'll actually just end up on Skyloft because the game, when you do a bit warp, your the Skyloft data, the Skyloft map actually does get saved to the file, but you load in before that happens, or it's loaded before that's changed. So if you do a bit warp without saving first after dying from a bit warp, then you'll end up on Skyloft.
Yeah, it's distinctly unhelpful.
Yes.
Deesh here will be getting a red rupee. This will set another flag that will be important for this file. He's going to sneak the beetle in there. The reason we need to get the beetle is to cut a single rope in Earth Temple. It's theoretically possible to skip getting the beetle, but in order to cut that one rope, you need to hit a keys with a Skyward strike at exactly the right angle so that the Skyward strike goes through the keys and hits the rope.
Yeah, similar to Cube Warp, but with far more RNG.
Yeah, it's pretty much TAS only.
I think it's been done tasked like what, once, twice by Venick.
Once or twice, yeah.
And then I don't even think anybody's ever even tried it, RTA.
I tried it for 5 minutes once.
And then you realized it was stupid.
And I realized I have better ways to spend my time.
Right. Deesh starting a pretty interesting thing here. So we're actually going to not fight Girahim. We're going to RBM past Girahim, although it's actually slower to RBM past Girahim. The real reason that this is faster is because we also need to copy file 1 to file 3 to be used later. Without needing to copy a file here, it's actually faster to just fight Girahim like normal, on average. Of course, you could have really bad Girahim RNG, like 7 darts or something. But typically, it's slower to skip Girahim.
So the order of operations here is actually very important. So we're bit saving file 3. Because we got the practice sword earlier, that is going to set a flag that will enable a cutscene here. But then we have to copy file 1 back to file 3 so that we still have that Skyview file. And now you can start the file and enter that cutscene, and you've written the flag corresponding to that cutscene into Skyview. And that flag activates the door after Girahim. And in the process of getting the boss key and everything, we set that flag permanently in Skyview, so we'll be able to skip that fight. I'll also point out that it's actually important that we save at that statue, because visiting that statue also sets a flag which we need for one of our later RPMs.
Deesh now on vines. Actually, remarkably difficult. Vines are very weird in Skyward Sword. Did a good job getting through there, though.
You still got to come back, though.
The vines are actually so weird that I made a vines tutorial just for this one spot.
This is probably the second part of the run that trips up new runners, is the vines.
Falling loses a remarkable amount of time, too.
Yeah, voiding out is like the slowest thing ever, and it's another one of those places where you make a small mistake and have 15 seconds to think about how you screwed up.
Yeah. And then you jump off and you miss the vine. You're like, I did it again.
All right, so we're going to see how dramatic the Girahim fight is here on Deesh's screen.
Yeah. We literally just run past him and leave. He tries to hit us. Someday, somebody will be hit there, and everybody will laugh. But it's never happened.
It's actually pretty embarrassing because he just like does a backhand slap, and because it's hero mode, it does 2 hearts of damage, and you're dead.
Yeah, it's really slow though, and you have to walk up to him first. So
yeah, it's easily avoided.
Nobody should ever be hit, but
someone will be someday.
It's gotta happen someday.
And
Chimera getting vined there, so
yeah,
he voided out because you're not actually supposed to take the vines back. There's a little path that you're supposed to take, and you're supposed to go over the rope again, the tight rope. But it's faster if you don't fall to take the vines back.
Yep. Because walking across the tight ropes is pretty slow in and of itself.
Very slow.
All right, so we have an interesting trick coming up here on Deesh's screen once we get through this FI text. He's going to be activating back in time and doing what we call an early light pillar. So he's going to be doing a specific set of moves in back in time to load the ruby tablet we just got into back in time. And then he's going to enter the goddess statue and place that tablet to start the tablet, the pillar opening cutscene during back in time. And by starting a file at a specific point, you're able to load that pillar onto that file. The interesting part of this is that we're not going to load the pillar onto file 1, which is our run file. We're instead going to load it onto file 2, which is our early game file.
Which doesn't have access to the sky at all.
Right, so it's saved, that file, if you remember, is saved right after the Loftwing tutorial. And that means that if that file leaves Skyloft and goes to the sky, it will trigger the Loftwing tutorial.
Yeah, the funniest part in all of this is that this is going to allow us to get to Farron, not Elden.
Yeah.
So, more on that later, I guess.
Yeah, more on that later. So it's important that Deesh picks up the rupee here. Picking up the rupee with file 1 selected is what loads the tablet into back in time.
Yeah, Link's inventory is loaded. He actually got it there, but he wasn't confident.
Yeah, because he didn't have the file selected when he first got the rupee, but I think what matters is that you have the file selected when you clear the text box.
Yeah, if you clear the text box and select the file at the same time, it still works.
Yeah. So I think,
oh no!
I think he actually just tried to get a stamina fruit because he really doesn't trust this.
Yeah.
And he went flying over the edge. We're now going to select the statue here while having file 3 active. And what that does is set a flag which will allow us to raise the pedestal inside the goddess statue.
Yeah, then he bit saved file 1, so that file 1's actually saved on Skyloft, because we do need to open up Elden on file 1 as well. We don't just need it on file 2, because we actually need to go there in our game file.
Yeah, and so that save teleported us essentially from the end of Skyview up to Skyloft, so we won't have to fly up.
Skip some cutscenes.
So we see the tablet being placed. Chimera's not too far behind here.
One thing that we haven't mentioned about Back in Time is that it's really easy to accidentally start a file. In which case, you of course just have to die again and redo Back in Time. Chimera actually almost started file 3 there, but thankfully he didn't.
Yeah, and that's not the only thing that can go wrong in Back in Time. If you, for some reason, open the map, you'll crash your console. During certain Back in Times, you might have a flag set which will cause a life tree seedling cutscene to play. And so if you look your camera in the wrong direction, it's not even doing something wrong, it's looking in the wrong direction, will trigger that cutscene, and that actually soft locks you. So you have to start over. So all of these Back in Times, the runners make them look pretty straightforward, but they're all pretty precise. So it's being fast and precise at the same time anytime we're on the menu screen.
And on top of all this trick in particular, if you fail it, you actually can't do it again later when you realize that it didn't work. So I noticed that Deesh actually didn't check. Oh, and neither did Chimera. Neither of them double checked that they actually opened or got the trick. So you can check this trick if you open the map on file 2. But neither of them did that. So if one of them gets to where they need it and it's not there, that's pretty much run over.
Yeah, I actually use first-person mode to actually look for the red pillar, which you'll be able to see on file 2. And just make sure, because as Exto mentioned, that's a run-over trick to miss.
Yeah, you can't do it later as well. No redoing that trick later, because you do need the Elden tablet in Link's inventory, and, well, you just put it away, right? You put it in here, so you won't have it later.
Yeah. It's essentially a very narrow window in the game in which we can do this trick. I'll also point out that Chimera used the revitalizing potion that we picked up earlier. This is another neat little health management thing here. We like to be on low health as much as possible, but we're about to do a trick, a bit warp, which will cause us to fall from a very large height, and that will deal 4 hearts of damage to us. So if we tried to do this trick on 2 hearts, we would die as soon as we landed, and that wastes time. So we use a revitalizing potion which heals us up to 6 hearts, or in Chimera's case 5 hearts, and that will essentially take care of the 4 damage we're about to take from our fall damage.
Yeah, Deesh probably forgot. He'll probably use it right here. Yeah.
There he goes.
I personally always forget when I do any percent.
I really just started running any percent again about a month ago, so I've been pretty good about remembering the little details like that, because it's not quite second nature to me yet. I feel like you start to forget things when it feels like it's second nature.
I've been doing hundo.
Yeah, that's
actually,
a whole
lately I
other
haven't been
kettle
doing
of
anything.
fish. Alright, so Deesh is setting up this bit warp. This is actually where you could do the digging mitts skip, which I mentioned earlier. But that only saves time. It's not even just a text thing. The digging mitts we're actually going to use once later on. And you can only skip that use of the digging mitts reasonably quickly if you're using the NTSC 1.0 version, which has a version-exclusive trick called Cistern Clip, which, for a long chain of reasons which I won't get into, allows you to skip having to dig up a ferry.
Yeah, this bit warp is actually pretty interesting because its positioning is really tight. So we actually warp inside of a goddess cube. It's actually the goddess cube that you can see in the background right at the beginning of Farron. But we actually warp into that goddess cube. So there's only a goddess cube-sized area on Skyloft that this trick works. So you need to be standing in a pretty particular position to get it to work.
And it's actually even worse than that, because if you're in slightly the wrong position, you can end up inside the goddess cube. So it's not just that you have to be in the goddess cube, you have to be like at an edge of the goddess cube, so that that edge pushes you under the ground and into the loading zone for this underground area.
Yeah, and you also, this is a trick that I think you have, for some reason, if you try it the 3rd time, there's just solid ground in the way. I
think
know.
it has to...
It's kind of weird.
I'm not completely sure, but I think it has to do with the way Elden is loaded. This area that we're... Elden Volcano is a very big area. So I think the area that we are bit warping into isn't completely loaded at that point in time. But I'm not sure of that.
Yeah, that would make sense. Kind of short version is that you can't really retry it, so...
Yeah. there is a backup strat which requires 2 precise bomb tosses, but that's really hard, and I don't think anyone even knows it because it's a relic of the old,
I've never
like,
heard of
pre-bit days. I've been running this game for a long time, so
Yeah.
I know tricks that went obsolete 8 years ago. So
Yeah, I've never heard of that before.
yeah. So both runners just did the digging myths fight. This is the most important use of the upgraded Skyward strike. There's like 8 to 10 bokoblins there that we take out all at once when done optimally.
Deesh actually got it in 1 strike, which is pretty tricky.
Yeah, that's pretty well done. He missed circles though.
Yeah, you can, if you run into this cutscene and roll it into it at kind of the right angle and with the right timing, then Link will just run around in circles, and it confirms world record, of course.
Yes. I actually got it in my last race, which is why I won.
Yes, it's very important.
Yes. So Deesh is about to do some more voodoo death magic, which is like how I like to think of RBM. This particular one is going to allow us to skip collecting the keys, the key shards to enter Earth Temple. And it involves going to back in time nighttime phase, which, as mentioned earlier, can only be done if you're not wearing the hero's tunic. And so it's important here that file 2 is saved before obtaining the hero's tunic, because then we can sleep tonight in a bed, exit to the exterior of Skyloft with that file, and avoid crashing.
Yeah, the bit of interest on Skyloft is actually for opening the shed to Betrot's house. So we're gonna open the we're gonna start file 1, and then open the shed while the file's loading, so that we can change that bit in memory after the file's already loaded. This one's relatively simple from a execution point of view.
Yeah, it's not too bad. There's no like hidden cutscenes waiting to ambush you or anything like that.
Not really, don't really have to worry about crashing or anything. Oh, Chimera is actually opting to sleep in the slower house for some reason.
This was the house that we originally slept in when RBM was first developed and we were sort of first figuring things out. So I guess maybe muscle memory.
Yeah, it's not a very big deal.
Yeah.
You can see Deesh started pushing the grave, or selected the grave and started the file at the same time, so that the cutscenes started playing as during the fade out. So Deesh should be good. He's got nothing to worry about.
One important part to this particular trick, though, is you have to remember to slash the grave before you push it. Because if you don't slash the grave, then it won't open the shed, and you'll have to do the whole trick over again.
You can try this one later when you actually get to the door, but it's just faster to do it there because you can die really fast in the lava.
Yeah, so the amusing part of this is that when we get to the top of the mountain here, the door is going to look like it's closed still, because we haven't reloaded the area yet, so the updated flag hasn't actually affected the region yet. But because of the way Elden Volcano uses its memory, the flag is still set, and the flag corresponds to the Earth Temple entering cutscene triggering. So you'll see how Deesh manages to get into Earth Temple in a minute here.
Yeah, looks like Deesh actually doesn't know that you regen stamina faster when not holding Z.
Yep, that is a true fact.
There's a lot of stuff in Skyward Sword that nobody ever talks about, so a lot of people just end up not knowing, which is kind of too bad. But
Yeah,
there's a lot of like super small things like that. It looks like Pika didn't know.
Yeah, for a new runner just starting out, they're going to be more focused on getting the big things right. Like all these crazy RBMs that we're doing, you have to be really precise about. So little things like, oh, you regenerate stamina faster by not holding Z, it's probably not high on their priority list.
Yeah, okay, apparently nobody knew that. Pika didn't know, Flo didn't know, Deesh didn't know.
I knew that.
Chimera playing it really safe there.
Still having this nunchuck issue. Yeah. This is another place where it's pretty bad to die because you're going to respawn all the way back down at that volcano ascent statue.
Deesh about to enter Earth Temple like all real men do.
This cutscene is way too long. But funny. Magmas are funny.
Magically.
Yep, you just teleport through the door. Alright, in Earth Temple, there's a couple tricks right at the start here. First, we invert our camera. Skyward Sword kind of acts on a out of sight, out of mind policy, so there's some lava platforms which rise and fall. By inverting the camera, we sort of unload them in such a way that we get a better cycle on those platforms. Now, he was trying to set up for little cutscene skips here. It's possible to skip the little cutscenes where we watch the drawbridge go down. Here's the only use of the beetle, by the way.
Yeah,
but to skip these cutscenes, you have to be in the air while the rope is cut. And so usually you do a little roll off the side of the staircase there. Deesh missed the timing on the first one and then unfortunately bonked on the second one. So he missed both of them.
The skipping cutscenes, because they tried to play while you're in the air, is actually going to come back later and it's going to be much more important, so keep that in mind.
Chimera barely made that cycle. The Keese was giving him some issues. And you can see on his screen he successfully got the first drawbridge skipped there. Deesh is going to set up for another RBM.
This one is going to skip the ball rolling segment, so it's going to bring up those platforms that you can kind of see on the left side of his screen there. It's actually going to be the exact same RBM as the one that we used to open the Earth Temple, so really nothing to say about that.
There is actually one interesting facet of this particular RBM. Because we cut one of the ropes here, ooh, Chimera took a death. That's actually not too bad a death, it's just going to put you back at the front of the dungeon, so he won't lose a ton of time, but he will lose some ground. So yeah, about this RBM, we've set a particular flag in Earth Temple that in Back in Time corresponds to the Thunderhead cutscene. There's a cutscene of the light beam shooting out and opening the Thunderhead. So when Deesh gets to the grave and pushes it open to start the shed cutscene, that flag also gets set. And so by doing this RBM, we will be able to open the Thunderhead on our file basically for free.
Oh, Chimera with the super unlucky, if you do a final blow on a Lizalfos, or I think any enemy, when it's right on the edge, Link will actually jump off the ledge. And so I think I've only ever seen that once before.
Oh, I saw that coming. You can kind of tell with where the Lizalfos lands. Like, the Lizalfos on the ground was kind of half off the edge. And that's a cue that you're going to jump when you hit him. So it was bad luck, because it's hard to stop when you're already in the motion of doing that final blow. And of course, he's trying to take damage here to get back down to 2 hearts because he's about to do the RBM that Deesh just did. But he unfortunately, well, first of all, is having controller issues, and second of all, he took the extra damage. He was too good at taking damage there.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate that happened.
Alright, Deesh is setting up for another small cutscene skip here.
I think he's going to take damage. Oh, no.
If he throws the bomb at the right place and is able to enter the crawl space as the bomb rolls through, he can skip the cutscene that normally fixes the camera and shows the bomb blowing up those rocks. You can also use the slingshot here to skip the cutscene that plays at the introduction of this fight. So Earth Temple has a ton of these little tricks, and when you get all of them in a row, it feels really good. When you miss all of them in a row, you really hate this temple.
I believe Earth Temple actually has more cutscene skips than the rest of the game combined in 100% as well.
Yeah,
which is really funny.
There's a lot of it.
There's like 5 or 6 cutscene skips at the very beginning of Earth Temple, and that's basically more than the rest of the game.
Alright, so Deesh has picked up the bomb bag. It is theoretically possible to skip the bomb bag.
It's really dumb. It's really, you have to the fight with Scaldera really revolves around you having the bomb bag. So fighting Scaldera without the bomb bag is a really bad experience.
It is possible, and it can actually, if you get it the first try, you only lose 40 seconds from not having the bomb bag. But that's a really big if.
Yes.
This bombless Scaldera fight has been referred to as really stupid. Because if you don't skip the last phase where he walks all the way up and then rolls all the way back down, then it can be literally impossible to hit him again. So you basically soft lock.
Yeah, Scaldera's hard enough with the bomb bag, so...
Yeah.
Ooh. Chimera scaring me. I thought he was going to jump off the ball and have another death.
Yeah, he was getting close there.
No, opting not to go for the magma skip.
Yeah, it's possible to use that little fire frog to gain enough height to jump onto the ledge to the right of this magma, and then jump over the text trigger. On Japanese, it's not a big deal, because that text is pretty fast. On English, it's more worth going for.
Chimera cutting it close with the bomb timer there.
I think that's controller related. And the Bokoblin got him during the cutscene.
Yeah, Bokoblins do move during select cutscenes, so during some cutscenes, Link is the only thing that isn't moving and the rest of the environment is moving as normal. That can also bite you in the butt on Sandship, but we're not actually going to see Sandship at all.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers. Sandship is a lie.
Chimera's having some really bad luck here in Earth Temple.
Yeah.
This is not treating him nicely right now.
Although, thankfully, he did already reload the area, so he's not going to have to reload the area again. I guess that's kind of one nice thing.
Yeah. So Deesh just did a small trick called stutter sprinting. Normally the slope he just ran up is supposed to be too large to go up in one go, and you're supposed to take a little side trip to blow up some rocks, which are blocking a little rest stop on the side. But by essentially stuttering your sprinting, alternately sprinting and stopping sprinting, you can make it all the way up in one go. So you just bait the boulders out of the way and make it all the way up. So Deesh is having his Indiana Jones moment here.
Yeah, this is actually the boss. I didn't notice that until I had been running this game for an embarrassingly long amount of time.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of the few places in the game where you get an instant kill if that boulder hits you.
Sometimes the boulder can actually not hit you and you can still get an instant death.
Yes, that's also true, because this game is special like that.
This game is 50% absolutely flawless, perfect programming, and 50% very much so not.
It's really impressive how long this game went without being broken. It pretty much took RBM to really break this game in half, because before RBM was discovered, this was a 5-hour speedrun, which had some cool little skips here and there, but basically no major sequence breaks aside from early Thunderhead.
Yeah, it was a very raw game. Very much so, just a really fast, casual run.
Yeah, and now with RBM, we've cut more than half the time off the run. It's been reduced to about 60% of, or 40% of what it used to be. So.
Yeah, the old record was nothing to laugh at, too. Nimzo's 450 was absolutely amazing.
Extremely good.
His largest time loss was like 18 seconds in a 5-hour run. I think he was a minute or two. I think it was about 2 minutes off of his sum of best.
Yeah. So that was a very impressive run, and now pretty much anyone who does a first run will beat that time.
Yeah, absolutely destroy it.
Alright, so Deesh is entering the Scaldera fight here. There's a specific set of movements that we can do to get a 3-cycle, and this is sometimes referred to as the tricycle fight. And there's a lovely animated GIF out there of Scaldera riding on a tricycle. There's a couple different strats for this fight, so I'm not sure which one Deesh is going to use, but they're all pretty precise. So you have to essentially manipulate his damage in such a way that he won't climb all the way up the ramp and roll all the way back down, because that's the slow part. And there are certain health thresholds which will change Scaldera's AI behavior.
all of the setups for it are remarkably precise. If you mess up pretty much at all, then you're very unlikely to not have Scaldera run up the hill at least once.
Yeah. There's also another aspect of this fight is that the hitbox for Scaldera's eye is quite poor.
Yes, it's very dumb.
There's actually like 6 different sets of rocks around Scaldera here, and when only one of those sets is blown up, it's actually pretty difficult to hit the eye. So we do this strat at the beginning where we actually reset his cycle so that we can blow up 2 sets of rocks. That makes it much easier to hit the eye. This last cycle is pretty precise.
Oh, looks like he was standing a little too close there. So the last hit that you do on Scaldera, you actually need the sword hit and the Skyward Strike to hit Scaldera's eye. So there's a pretty precise distance that you have to be standing away from the eye in order for it to get hit, in order for both to hit. If you're standing too close, then you'll only have the sword hit, and if you're standing too far, then you'll only have the strike hit.
So he cleans up that fight pretty well, getting a 4-cycle fight instead of a 3-cycle fight. That's about as good as you can get without doing it perfectly.
Yeah, sometimes you feel like you got a 10-cycle fight.
It's another one of those things where if you're slightly off, or even if you don't do anything wrong, Scaldera's eye can also just not give you an opening for that last hit. You have the entire time it takes for Scaldera to walk all the way up the ramp and roll all the way back down to think about how you failed.
Actually, if you go fast enough, you can always get it. You can hit his eye before it moves.
Well, that's good. Even so, though.
Yeah, it's still really very.
It's a long walk. Deesh is filling up on bombs here a little bit. We use, in the standard route, 9 bombs total, I think. Possibly 10. The Scaldera fight is 5 of those bombs. So the bombs that Deesh just picked up should be enough for the rest of his run. And we'll get to see if Chimera gets the 3-cycle, although given his controller difficulties, I'm not so sure.
I can speak from experience and say that having your nunchuck randomly stop working is very frustrating.
Indeed.
Not that it really matters, but Deesh actually went for the older, and I think what's typically regarded as slightly more precise tricycle Scaldera.
Yeah, Deesh's strat is the one that I know, because I'm old.
Yeah.
I know that there is a newer strat that I think was developed by first SVA and then Jace, but that's not something I've had the chance to learn yet.
Yeah, I don't actually know it either. Never seen what Chimera is doing here, though. This is interesting.
I think he went for the newer strat.
Ooh, we got a double hit.
Had some issues with the hit detection on Scaldera's eye, as we mentioned. So he's intentionally damaging down to 2 hearts here because we're going to want to do some more RBMs. And he's going to have to watch the walk again.
Yeah, Chimera must not know that it's much easier to hit his eye with a horizontal Skyward Strike at this point. You can also hit, when Chimera's throwing a bomb into his mouth here, you can actually hit the eye with a Skyward Strike then, and that'll also knock him down like this, and it'll deal Skyward Strike damage. I guess he either doesn't know that or isn't going for it.
It's sometimes a little precise too. Sometimes that Skyward Strike just won't hit.
Yeah, it's also really weird because it can hit through the rocks in the middle of Scaldera's face.
And that's the story of Scaldera's hitbox, pretty much. It makes no sense. Yeah, so we didn't get a tricycle, but the GIF is too good to not post, so I'm going to post it anyway.
I love this.
So because we did early Thunderhead during that RBM in Earth Temple, it's now open, so Deesh has headed to the Isle of Songs to pick up Furor's Courage. The only reason we need Furor's Courage is to make the Farron Trial Gate appear, The only reason we need that is to get the Water Dragon scale. The only reason we need that is to enter Ancient Cistern. And the only reason we need to beat Ancient Cistern is to prevent the Imp 2 fight from crashing. So that whole chain of dependencies sees us pushing a pedestal around a few times.
Yeah, it actually doesn't crash on emulator, which is interesting.
Yes, but it does on console.
So, emulator % is very fast. Ooh, nice. You can side hop there to skip a 4-second cutscene. It's really, really weird. The timing for it's very strange.
And actually, there's a trick here where you can skip solving this puzzle by setting one of the platforms so that it will spin all the way around, using your bird to land on that platform as it's spinning, and then rolling at a precise time to get into the crawl space as the platform swings by. It's a trick called Wormhole. I think one person has ever done it. And because we only visit the Isle of Song once, it's actually technically faster.
It's very, very tricky, though. I believe Tilo, the guy who got it, tried it for like an hour or something before he managed to pull it off.
I was there for that stream, and it was 2 hours, and he did it once and never tried it again. Alright, so Deesh is setting up for yet another RBM. This is going to be similar to one we've seen already. This is going to be the early Lanayru pillar. Unlike the Elden pillar, which we put onto file 2, we're going to keep this one on file 1. And really, the only thing this saves is first having to fly back to Skyloft, but secondly, some of the text and cutscenes around placing the pillar.
That said, it saves a surprising amount of time, only skipping that.
It does. It does. I failed this in my PB and lost something like a minute.
Ooh. Almost starting file 1 there.
Yeah. He picked up the rupee for the same reason he did before. That loads the tablet into back in time. He's going to visit this statue with file 3 selected.
Oh.
That time. Yep.
Okay.
He accidentally selected file 1, so he had to back out and select file 3. That should still work. He needs to enter the goddess statue here with file 3 selected. Essentially, when you go through a loading zone, it takes information from the file that is selected as you go through that loading zone.
Oh, it looks like Chimera got hit by a Skytail.
But he still has full health.
I thought he was at 2. From Scaldera.
Oh, did he die? I must have missed it.
I admittedly wasn't watching.
Yeah, so Deesh has started the cutscene for the Lanayru pillar, and now he's going to be doing basically the same trick he did before to get that onto file 1. He also bit saved file 1 of the Lower Academy statue while doing this, so that skips him flying back and puts him pretty close to a platform that aims him towards Lanayru. So it's pretty efficient there.
That should be good. Yeah.
That death on Chimera's side is actually doubly bad again because he is at 6 hearts again and is about to try and do the same RBM. So he's going to lose a little more time from having to bomb himself 3 times instead of just once. You know, I keep expecting someone to reroute the Isle of Songs puzzle solution to like save 1 push somehow.
Yeah, it's been the same since like the game came out.
Since 2012. I was doing the same puzzle 8 years ago, so yeah. Alright, Deesh has landed in Lanayru. If you like Lanayru, this is your moment. This is your like 2 minutes of glory.
Yeah, so Lanayru is super short, so we kind of alluded at this but didn't explicitly say it, but all the bird statues, at least all the orange ones, the ones that you can land down, have scene flags attached to them. And so since they have scene flags attached to them, potentially we can RBM them if they line up in a good spot. And it just so happens that the bird statue that's right in the area where you get the harp, it lines up so that we can RBM it. And actually RBM it relatively quickly. So all we need to do is RBM that, and then update the scene flags, and then we can land there and completely skip all of Lanayru. Absolutely everything, because we only need the harp.
I'd like to quickly point out something Chimera did. He bombed himself twice before saving, so that means that when he reloads, he'll only have 2 hearts, which will make all his subsequent RBMs faster again. So it's just a minor little time save.
It does mean that he's down 2 bombs, however, so he is going to have to watch out for that later.
Yeah, I think he picked up a couple extra, so I think he'll be fine, but... This RBM that Deesh is doing here, he has to be careful not to point the statue and point his camera in the wrong direction, because this is one of the ones where that life tree seedling cutscene can snag you and force you to redo the whole thing.
Yeah, turning counterclockwise there, which is the faster way, will actually start that cutscene. So you have to be careful to turn clockwise, which is very unintuitive.
I'm super paranoid about this particular RBM, and I literally use Z to face the camera away from the pumpkin patch and backflip down the ladder.
That's actually a good idea. It's
slow, but less scary somehow.
It's an awful lot faster than getting wrecked by Fi.
Yeah. Alright, so fun fact about this little Batro text. It's quite a long text because it's introducing a whole set of cutscenes related to gratitude crystals, where basically if you do nice things for people, they will spit out gratitude crystals and you can collect them and bring them to this demon. He talks a lot. And it's the very last text box that we need to RBM to get the statue we're looking for. This text is 29 seconds slower on English than it is on Japanese. Half a minute.
Yeah, that's painful.
I'll also point out a little bit of background about this trick. It was known for quite a while that if we could get to the Temple of Time area in Lanayru, we could skip all of Lanayru Mining Facility. If you go to that area normally in casual play, there's a big set of rocks which is blocking the entrance into the temple area. So people tried for quite a long time to figure out a way to get over those rocks. None of our usual bit warps worked because the statues weren't at the right coordinates. People tried high flipping, they tried all sorts of weird momentum tricks, but no one could figure out a way to get over that set of rocks. And so, of course, with RBM, we're able to access the statue, which is on the other side of those rocks. So essentially, instead of going over the rocks, we can just completely ignore them.
Deesh is ahead, even though it looks like they're both doing the exact same thing right now.
I would say Deesh has roughly a 3-minute lead, 3 to 4 minutes.
Yeah, there you can see the bird statue on Deesh's map. Actually, it looks kind of weird because it's in an unexplored area.
I like to think of it as Batro knows the secret of how to get to the Temple of Time, and if you listen to him in Back in Time, he'll tell you how to get there.
I always say things like that in Hundo. It's like, yeah, Olan holds the secrets to the Clawshot trial, and he's going to tell us how to open it.
Yeah. So this loading zone that Deesh is going through is actually the back door into Lanayru Mining Facility. So we briefly go in, and then we backflip out, and the game is programmed the first time you leave this exit to give you the harp. So we just completely skipped Lanayru Mining Facility, got the harp, and yeah, now we're going to leave Lanayru because we're done.
Ooh, and Deesh gets the lovely split second. So there's 2 frames where you can backflip or side hop out of a cutscene there. And so Deesh got it. It only saves about 15 seconds on Japanese. Now he's doing Back in Time, and this Back in Time is really weird. So Back in Time actually changes its timing window depending on what area you're in. And that area in particular, you don't even have half a second between pressing A on the controller and resetting the console. You have a very, very small amount of time. It's very, very unnatural because in most places you have a massive window for Back in Time.
Yeah, most of the time bit is pretty forgiving to activate. It's complicated once you get there, but it's easy to do. That place is different. Another place which is different is the Isle of Songs. So you noticed when we got Farore's Courage and saved at the statue, we actually left before blowing ourselves up. That's because it's too hard to activate Back in Time in the Isle of Songs. So we actually just leave and activate it outside.
But only after watching one of the cutscenes. If you just go in and try to do Back in Time, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. So,
it's very weird.
Deesh is doing our first example of a Farron Back in Time. He has accessed the sky during Back in Time, He saved file 2 at a statue, which activates the ability to call your Loftwing, and then he jumped off one of the platforms. And by selecting file 2 as you're loading into the sky, it loads the Loftwing tutorial. Now, the Loftwing tutorial has fixed boundaries. You can't actually go to any part of the sky during this. You can, you're only within a certain area. So, for instance, you can't reach the Farron Pillar, you can't reach the Lanayru Pillar, but you can reach the Eldin Pillar.
Just barely.
Just barely. And the way the game is programmed, the first time you enter any pillar, it thinks you're going to Farron, because that's the first place you're supposed to go. And so even though we go to the Eldin Pillar, we are now in Farron Woods. This particular RBM is used to skip learning the Ballad of the Goddess. And we have to talk to Groose here in order to set the right story flag, I believe. So that when we enter the temple, we'll be able to trigger the Ballad of the Goddess cutscene.
Yeah, so the reason that we can do RBMs, like opening the Earth Temple door by changing things on Skyloft, is because those flags are in some shared memory. So every time you go into a new area, it loads in some new information about that area. Story flags, though, are not like that. Story flags are the same no matter where you are. So that means if we're going to RBM a story flag, we actually have to get to the story flag and back in time. And then you also can't deselect a file and reselect a file here, because that'll that'll load the information from the file, and it's not actually stored on that file. You didn't save the story flag onto that file.
And we have to select file 2 as soon as we get into the temple to trigger the cutscene, and then quickly switch back to file 1 so that we can start it and clear the text time. It's also important for this trick that you're saved at a save prompt, because what this trick is actually doing is what's called a reverse bit warp. It takes the coordinates where your file is saved and applies them to the sealed temple map. But because we're saved at a save prompt, it doesn't actually change the coordinates. So when we spawn into the cutscene, we spawn at the usual place. If we were saved at a statue, we would spawn out of bounds and be soft locked. So this trick can only be done from a save prompt, and there are relatively few save prompts that appear in the run. So it's actually pretty important that we do this now. Chimera is heading to the surface. Looks like he's heading to the Farron Pillar. So it looks like he won't be doing Ballad of the Goddess skip. He's going to be watching the Groose cutscene normally. Actually, he might be doing the newer route. We will see. Deesh, meanwhile, is going back to Farron bit. He's beginning the Song of the Hero skip. So you saw him open file 2 as he loaded into the sky there. That's actually very important. If he didn't load file 2, then the game would crash, because the layers of the sky that are stored in file 1 and file 3 won't load correctly into back in time.
Yeah, Chimera also talked to Fledge at the beginning.
Yeah, so Chimera is doing a slightly different route than what Deesh is doing, and this is a route that is, I think, newer and slightly faster. So he has seen the Groose cutscene normally, which means when he does Ballad of the Goddess skip later, he'll be able to do it a little more efficiently.
I think Ballad of the Goddess skip was actually removed. Or no, the Imprison 2 RBM.
I think it's the Imprison 2 RBM that was removed.
Okay.
But admittedly, I'm not as familiar with that particular
I've only
route.
done one run on the new route. And it was very much so read the route and do what it says.
Well, the new route is actually, I think, not faster on English, so
Yes,
I haven't looked into it at all. Alright, so Deesh is doing an important part of this trick here. He's going to do a bit save, which will put his file 1 in this position. It also he used File 1 to visit the Upper Academy statue before leaving Skyloft and back in time. That sets a flag which will trigger a cutscene when we enter Farron Woods here. And so what he needs to do is, during this Phi cutscene, he needs to open File 1 and start it, and then press 2 to cancel the cutscene. And if you could just barely see at the end there, Link sort of made a like surprise noise, like a surprised animation, which indicates that a certain cutscene started, and that cutscene corresponds to the flag 7X04, which in the sealed grounds corresponds to the door to Hylia's realm being open, or rather openable.
One unfortunate thing about Skyward Sword is that all of the biggest tricks look like nothing happens.
Yeah.
So that basically looked pointless because aside for starting at a different spot than when he started the trick, it really looks like nothing happened.
But that particular trick he just did, if it worked correctly, saved about an hour and a half.
Yes. Biggest trick in the game.
Right there. So yeah, Deesh is now heading to the trial that Chimera is about to begin, but Chimera still has to deal with Ballad of the Goddess skip, whereas Deesh has already done that. So Deesh is a little bit ahead.
We didn't actually say anything about playing the harp, but the circle of light that goes in and out actually has nothing to do with the time or whether or not you can put a pedal down. So what the game actually does is check if you change directions within a certain amount of time, within like a certain region of time. And so if you kind of go towards the beginning of that region of time, then you can completely desync yourself from the Ring of Light. Also, what Deesh just did there was a trick called Harp Cancel. So normally after you finish playing the harp, Phi sings a song and Link plays the harp, and it's pretty cool. But you can actually skip that if you press B right before the cutscene happens. And then it won't look like you did, but you did do it, and then you'll be able to open the trial.
You can tell it works when the 12th flower pedal like goes down immediately and you're canceling out of the harp playing. And the way I do the trick, at least, is you wait till pretty late in that window that Exto was describing, you press B, and then you do a very quick 12th strum. Like, I act like I'm punching someone on the left of me because I really don't like them.
The only reason it's actually better to wait like that is because it's really easy to go early since you're thinking about harp cancel, I'm pretty sure, which is interesting.
Yeah, I always...
It's actually the exact same window, but it's super easy to go early and fail.
And the issue with going early, if you go too early, you have to do the whole harp playing over again. Because if you only get 11 out of the 12 flowers, it just resets completely. If you go too late, you just miss the cancel and have to watch the cutscene.
Interestingly enough, if you fail it and then get it, it's roughly the same as just failing it and watching the cutscene.
Yeah, so like, watching the cutscene, you failed it once. But if you fail it twice, then you're losing time over just doing it normally.
It's not too hard, though. I don't think.
I have trouble with it sometimes. Usually when I'm not being violent enough with my punching.
Also, yes, always point your controller at your sensor bar before you play harp.
Yes.
I find that surprisingly few people know how overpowered pointing your controller at your sensor bar is in this game.
Yeah. There are times where you don't need it, but there are times when it's particularly helpful. Flying the beetle, I find, is one of those.
Yes.
And swimming is another
Yes.
one.
So you don't actually need a sensor bar after you've calibrated Skyward Sword. You could calibrate your controller right at the beginning and then unplug your sensor bar and play the rest of the game, quote, just fine. But by pointing your sensor bar at your screen, it actually recalibrates which direction is forward, which is really, really, really good.
So Deesh hit the Waking Water here, which is okay if he can dodge these two Guardians.
Should be fine.
Yeah. This trial, I believe, recently got a small reroute that saves a little bit of time. But I think it's also slightly riskier than the standard route.
Yes, I've actually been failing it a lot recently. Very annoying.
failing a trial is a pretty big time loss because it resets you all the way back to the beginning, and in true Skyward Sword fashion of letting you think about what you've done, Fi scolds you and gives you advice on how to do the trial better.
Yeah, the slight reroute was in all of these Silent Realms, there's kind of one tier that it's really obvious that you're supposed to get that one first, and we don't get it first anymore. And it saves a slight amount of time getting it at the end. Deesh here having troubles getting away from the Watcher, Guardian, whatever they're called.
Yeah, that sometimes it's okay to get caught. That's a bad place to get caught because there's a Guardian right there waiting to snag you.
So Deesh now grabbing the 2 tiers that we used to grab at the very beginning of the trial.
Yeah. The reason this route is scary, this sort of newer route, is that the first tier is right next to a Guardian. So you have to sort of dodge him a little bit. And at least for me, it's not consistent.
You kind of have to go to the right to get him to walk in the proper direction. If you stay too far to the left, then he'll just hit you.
Oh.
I've actually managed to pick up the tier and be hit both at the same time before.
That's impressive.
Yeah. I was a little buffed.
Yeah. Chimera's doing an RBM here, which will actually duplicate gratitude crystals. And yes, we actually get some gratitude crystals in any percent. And in fact, we do like the first whole chunk of the Batro side quest, including getting the first reward. But we do all of it in Back in Time, and it's just to set different flags to do certain RBM tricks. This particular one just gives us 5 gratitude crystals, and we're going to use that to do a different RBM later on, which will skip, well, the sand ship and the sand sea. So it's another one of those. Yeah, it's another one of those innocuous looking tricks that saves like 30 to 40 minutes. Deesh is setting up for that same trick, but the bomb's rolling down.
You put the bomb on the stairs.
Nice. Yeah, so while it looks like Chimera is ahead, Deesh has already done Ballad of the Goddess skip and Song of the Heroes skip, and Chimera has not done either of those, as I understand it.
Yes, that sounds right.
Chimera is setting up to do the RBM that we just mentioned, which uses 5 gratitude crystals. This RBM is going to load the trial gate into Eldin, and that's what skips having to do the sand ship, because normally to open this trial gate, you need Din's power, and to get Din's power, you need to beat the sand ship. So by loading the trial gate in like this, we don't actually have to do any of that.
Yeah, this one's going to be very, very similar to the one at the start of Laneru for getting the bird statue after the facility.
Yeah, we're going to go and visit Batro again. The difference is we're going to enter Batro with a file that has those 5 gratitude crystals. And so instead of doing his big, long introductory cutscene about, hey, I'm a demon, please help me get gratitude crystals, he's going to instead say, oh, you gathered some gratitude crystals. Here's this lovely medium wallet for you. And the last text box after getting the medium wallet is the one that sets the flag that we want. But this is why we need to get the 5 gratitude crystals to do this particular trick. So you'll notice on Deesh's screen, he actually opened the menu to check to make sure that he got his 5 gratitude crystals. Because if you miss that trick, there's no visible sign that you missed it. And then you get to where Chimera is right now, to this part of the RBM, and Batro's like, hey, you should go gather some gratitude crystals. And you're like, wait, I don't have them? And then you have to go back and get the crystals and then redo this RBM as well. So that's a big time loss.
All right, that should work. For the most part, for these text, for these RBMs where you have to RBM someone's text, you really just have to, you have to die to reload the area. Sorry, just forgot. You have to die to reload the area so that the trial gate actually appears. But as I was saying, for these ones where you RBM at the end of someone's text, thankfully you can just advance the text and start the file at the same time, and that works with only one really weird exception in 100%.
Yeah, it makes the timing very easy, as opposed to some of the other ones where you have to start as the pillar is loading, so there's a specific place you have to start at, and there isn't really a good cue to start. You kind of get a feel for those timings, but it's not as easy as just starting and clearing at the same time.
For example, early pillar, there's not much of a...
Yeah.
You just kind of have to feel.
Yeah, definitely.
This trial, though, definitely the hardest of all the trials. It's really easy to do something silly and lose a fair amount of time.
It's also the longest one, so there's sort of more to it, which gives you more time to make a mistake. And there's also a couple kind of tricky jumps. If you miss, you're going to end up with them lost.
Yeah, there's really two things that can lose you time here. You can either get seen by a watcher, or you can fall in the lava. And ideally, you do neither.
It's definitely the hardest trial in any percent because, well, there's only 2 in any percent, and it's not the Farron one that's the hardest.
And the Farron one's really easy.
Ooh, just dodged that one. That was some interesting movement. I don't think I've seen that before.
No, that was remarkable.
I usually sort of go around that first watcher to the right side and then curl back to the left. This is the first of those little hops I was talking about. It's a pretty cheeky side hop there, but it sort of skips you to a later part in what's sort of the usual sequence. If you're quick with your movement and good with your camera, you can actually not have to wait for that particular watcher there, but it's a little bit tight.
Yeah, you actually have to be quite fast for that to happen. Time to have a little visit from our good old friend, the rope.
Yep. This is one of the most annoying tiers, in my opinion.
Yes, this rope is extra weird. Because Link just, like, flicks his legs and, I don't know, just moves in random direction.
He's got to get back to the upper ledge, too, because there's a tier up here that we haven't gotten yet.
Deesh actually got seen there, or something. Yeah, it looks like Deesh got seen by the watchers on the way down.
It looks like he went and got that tier first, actually, because he had the text box.
Oh, you're right. He did get that tier first.
He's doing a different route than Chimera did. He didn't go up the sand slide to get those 3 tiers yet.
I don't think that rope needs a tutorial. The other ropes definitely did, though. Yeah, Deesh has always been talking about how he thinks this is faster, and everybody's kind of been like, yeah, okay, Deesh.
Unfortunately, that's kind of the general community reaction to Deesh. Which is unfair, because he does a lot of good stuff.
Yes, he has found a lot of good things.
Yeah. But I don't know, that's just how it is.
Good man.
Yeah. I'm interested to see how this route finishes up. Like, when is he going to go back and get those other slide tiers that...
Oh, it's the exact same. But, like, imagine cutting the trial in half, the first half being the, like, slope part, and then this being the second half. He just switches the halves.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's actually the exact same amount of time.
This particular rope here is frequently challenging from a calibration standpoint. Chimera had some issues with it earlier. Deesh didn't have too much trouble. I usually take an extra second or so to make sure I'm going onto the rope head on, and that seems to help. Because I find if I go on at an angle, the calibration never catches up. I always fall off the rope. So Chimera's heading up for the top 3 tiers here. And Deesh is heading over. Oh, he missed this cycle.
That's not too bad. There's a tier that's really safe to get. As long as you remember to do a forward hop there to not fall in the lava, then he should be fine.
Yeah, that was the important part. Not falling in the lava right after the cutscene. So he missed that jump.
Immediately after, but everyone falls in the lava here, so... Ooh.
Well, it's better to fall in the lava when you're not being chased by watchers than when you are. And you can see how much time it takes to respawn after falling in the lava, which is why we try very hard to avoid it. Alright, so I think that was a fairly solid trial from Chimera, with the exception of some rope issues.
Really small thing. If you roll into these, like the circle of light here at the end, it actually skips a cutscene of Link walking horribly slowly. Very, very, very slowly into the center. So it's actually quite a bit faster.
You also skip the little jingle that normally plays when you collect all the tiers, at least
On English.
on the English version you do.
On English only.
All these very important English-only differences.
Yeah, but there's very few of them.
Cistern Clip being the biggest one, and I will always love Cistern Clip and defend it with my dying breath.
I love it, it's just I don't love the rest of English.
That's fair. What you're saying is you don't love English text.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the only other difference that matters.
Yep.
Although it is really funny to roll into the circle of light and just have complete silence.
Yep.
Anyway,
Alright.
Chimera
So-
heading on to Fire Sanctuary. So another one of the really big RBM tricks coming up here is going to be the one for skipping going to get the water basin from the water dragon. So there's actually a really difficult RBM here that we're going to have to do. Our goal is to actually go to the lumpy pumpkin in Back in Time, but that's got some interesting challenges with it. So if you remember, we can get to the sky, but it's during the tutorial. So kind of two things there. We've got a restricted movement, and we also actually can't dive off of our bird. So even if we could get to the lumpy pumpkin, then we'd have no way to get inside the lumpy pumpkin, because we need to get the gratitude crystal that's outside the lumpy pumpkin. So, well, we'll see what happens.
One thing I want to mention is that the reason we get the fire shield earrings is not necessarily to protect us from heat, but to make it so that Fi will actually let us go into the volcano summit. Because if you go there without the fire shield earrings, there's a text trigger that forces you backwards. And if we could get into volcano summit without that, we could theoretically, like, we'd be burning and we'd be losing health, but we could theoretically do what we needed to do in volcano summit without the fire shield earrings.
If
So
you can find a way to jump slightly further in Skyward Sword, I'll love you forever.
Yeah, pretty much. This RBM, by the way, is a slightly different one. It's the same one that we did to skip Girahim. This particular RBM will lower the second wall of flames on the way to Fire Sanctuary. That's pretty important to do because that wall of flames normally requires you to use the claw shots to claw up to some vines. And we don't have the claw shots. So that's our only feasible way of lowering that particular firewall. The water basin skip that Exto described is what Chimera will be doing right now.
I think in particular the one he just did actually waters the frog, which doesn't sound like it'd be an important difference, but if you RBM the frog being watered, then when you go in and out of the area, the flames will stay down. But we actually just RBM the flames themselves to get into Fire Sanctuary. So if you, for example, pour the water on the floor, then you'd have to do the trick again.
Yes. It's a minor difference, but extremely important. Because once we do successfully get into Fire Sanctuary, we will not be able to leave Fire Sanctuary because that firewall will be active again. And so if we try to leave the dungeon, we'll be stuck behind it. And that will become relevant as we're trying to complete Fire Sanctuary because there is going to be a time when we want to leave the dungeon.
Yes, the game doesn't end in Fire Sanctuary.
Sadly.
Also, Fire Sanctuary is actually, we're gonna see more Skyloft in Fire Sanctuary than we are Fire Sanctuary.
Yeah, it's not really Fire Sanctuary anymore. I call it RBM Sanctuary. You can complete all of Fire Sanctuary with 4 RBMs and a little bit of swordplay.
Yeah. So now we're seeing Chimera actually get to the Lumpy Pumpkin. So we don't have a way of removing the restriction of the Loftwing tutorial, but we do have a way of removing the restriction of not being able to jump off your bird. So when you actually get on your bird, when you land on your bird, it loads story flags. So what we can do is we can go to Farron, go back up into the sky, and then open a file that allows us that where we can jump off of our bird before we land on our bird, and then that way we can jump off the bird. But then what we're going to have to do is fly up really high into the sky and dive to the Lumpy Pumpkin, because we can't escape the tutorial bounds.
Yeah, it's kind of silly. We go to the surface solely so that we can go back to the sky and jump off our bird.
Yeah, this trick is I'd say this trick's probably the hardest for new runners to learn.
I still have trouble with it from time to time. The skydive can be pretty tricky because there are sometimes clouds between you and the Lumpy Pumpkin that makes your target difficult to see. And you need to make sure to get enough height, because if you undershoot the Lumpy Pumpkin, you have to call your loft wing. And as you can see on Chimera's screen, the way these boundaries work is if you're outside the boundaries for whatever reason, it warps you back to the closest point that's within those boundaries. And so if we miss the dive onto the Lumpy Pumpkin, we have to call the loft wing, and that warps us back so that we have to try the whole skydive again. And this skydive takes some time to do.
Also, we have to be careful to not advance through all the text boxes, because then the wing ceremony cutscene will start, and we also have to be careful to not sit on the title screen, because that'll cause the like pre-game slideshow video thing to play.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to be aware of, but all of that is actually not too hard. What you can do is when you go back to the sky, you press A to open the file select menu, and then you just keep holding it. You don't let go of A.
Chimera playing it very safe here.
Yeah, I always play it very safe too. You don't have to get to the highest height in order to make it here, but it's a little bit safer, and it allows for getting turned around a little bit in the sky for whatever reason.
Chimera also seems to not know that the yaw of the controller is important for diving. Tilt, roll, and yaw are all very important for diving in Skyward Sword.
This is exactly how skydiving works in real life.
Yeah, also the casual 300-meter fall link's fine.
It's a good thing we have 6 hearts in bit though, because that deals 4 hearts of damage. Alright, so Deesh is setting up to do the same skydive that Chimera just did, and Chimera is making his way inside. Since we're on the Lumpy Pumpkin and not Skyloft, it is possible to exit to nighttime while wearing the hero's tunic. Which is good, because we need to have file 1 selected as we go outside to load the gratitude crystal in the shed here. There's actually a different version of water basin skip involving activating the Farron trial during Back in Time. I'm not actually sure which version is worse to do, but I know this one is faster, so...
I believe this one's quite a bit faster as well.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a very close match.
So it's very important that Chimera picked up this water. As mentioned before, if we go into this sort of entryway to the fire sanctuary and for whatever reason can't douse the first firewall, then we have to actually leave and do the water basin skip again. Oh no, Deesh
activated the cutscene. He skipped through too many text boxes.
And that's going to be a big time loss, because he has to do that whole thing again.
Yeah, they're probably roughly even now, if I had to guess.
It's probably pretty similar, because Chimera's had a pretty clean segment here.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult to tell who's actually ahead until Chimera finishes up his Ballad of the Goddess and Song of the Hero skips.
You can see right there.
Probably won't happen till the end.
You can see right now that the frog is not watered. So if you do leave the area and come back, the flames will be there.
All right. So while Deesh attempts water basin skip again, I will do my best to explain RBM Sanctuary here. We want to do 4 total RBMs, but what we're going to do is actually do 3 of them and then try to leave Fire Sanctuary, and we'll get to the leaving part in a minute. The first 3 RBMs we're going to do here are going to be visiting the Lower Academy statue, the Upper Academy statue, and getting the crystal in Oriel and Pero's house. One of those three will lower a gate later on, which will allow us to access the boss key room from the wrong side. The crystal in Oriel Impero's house gives us access to the overworld bird statue, which is at the end of Fire Sanctuary. And so what we're going to do to skip most of the dungeon is leave the dungeon and fly back into that statue. And then the third one of those does half of a trick called Magma Myth Skip. It's a trick that lowers the gate that is blocking the boss key chest that you normally have to use the Magma Myths and fight the Moldorm underground to get. We'll do the fourth RBM, which is sort of the second flag needed to do that skip, when we revisit Fire Sanctuary the second time. But in between, we need to leave Fire Sanctuary, and since the flame wall will be active when we leave, the only way we have of leaving Fire Sanctuary is to use Back in Time. And since we're going to do Back in Time anyway, we're going to combine that Back in Time with a different trick called the Ancient Cistern Reverse Bit Warp, or the Cistern RBW. But we'll explain that when we get there.
Yeah, RBW is actually more syllables than reverse bit warp. There's a little fun fact.
That is a
Faster
very
to say
fun fact.
reverse bit warp than RBW.
I don't know. I like RBW better.
It's a negative abbreviation.
Alright, so Deesh is setting up for his next attempt at the skydive here. So you notice that gate opened when Chimera selected File 2. That's because File 2 has that particular flag set. So we can use what's called bit magic, not reverse bit magic, but bit magic, to take the flags that are on a file and affect the bitmap as we are running around it.
Yeah. Between all these RBMs, you also have to commit them. And thankfully, also kind of, it's a bit of a blessing, bit of a curse. There's these owl statues here at the beginning, and they have rupees in them, but their hitbox is just so terrible.
Yeah,
it's so hard to hit them.
The one on the right isn't too bad because you're at a pretty good angle to it, but if you try to hit the one on the far left, it's like literally impossible to hit it from the statue. You have to like run over towards the owl statue a little bit. But if I remember right, we don't actually end up using that statue to commit a flag. So Chimera so far has shot the right owl statue for a rupee.
Oh yes, we need the fairy.
Yes, he knocked down the water pod, and then this third one he's doing, we're going to commit by digging up a fairy. And this has two purposes. The first is to commit the flag. It's also the one use of the digging mitts in the run. But we actually want the fairy too, because the trick we're about to do, the Cistern Reverse Bit Warp, is going to deal a lot of damage to Link. And so we need the fairy in order to survive this coming trick.
You could get the sailcloth, but that would be slow.
And actually, because the NTSC 1.0 version has a trick called Cistern Clip, they can do a different version of this reverse bit warp trick that prevents you from having to get the fairy. So that's one advantage that English has over Japanese.
This reverse bit warp also is very precise. So we actually want to reverse to stand in such a spot where we fall into the basement of Ancient Cistern. And so there's a really, really precise spot where you can do that from this statue. So that's kind of the only Ocarina of Time-esque setup in all of Skyward Sword. Also, it looks like Deesh forgot to get water here. So he's going to have to redo the Lumpy Pumpkin RBM one more time.
And that puts Chimera solidly in the lead now.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of places to lose time from here to the end, but if Chimera has a solid endgame here, I think he's going to be in good shape. Yeah, so that precise positioning puts us in a place where there's actually sort of two floors to the basement region that we're going to be reverse bit warping into. The first is sort of a passage at the upper level, which is normally meant to give you like a little preview of the basement area as you're going through the dungeon normally. We want to miss that area, but we want to hit the area below that, which is the actual basement itself. And so there's a very thin area where we can miss the top layer but land in the bottom layer. So for the reverse bit warp itself, the way a reverse bit warp works is you enter an area through a loading zone and you start a file at the right time. And that will spawn you in the area that you entered, but with the coordinates from the file that you started. So by saving in that precise location in Fire Sanctuary, we are going to be able to apply those precise coordinates to the Ancient Cistern. But in order to do this, we have to enter the Ancient Cistern during Back in Time. This requires having the Water Dragon scale, so we have to do the Farron trial before doing this trick.
This is all just so that we don't have to deal with the waterfall in front of Ancient Cistern as well.
Yeah, the waterfall will not be loaded in Back in Time, and we will be able to load the Water Dragon scale so that we can enter the cistern. This mainly skips everything associated with the water basin quest. So that's visiting Skyview a second time to get sacred water. That's listening to the water dragon drone on and on about how she's injured and needs sacred water. And oh, you have sacred water, so let me let you into my temple.
Longest cutscene in the game.
Yeah, the way we used to do it, we had the sacred water when we went to visit her, so it put sort of 2 cutscenes back to back. And on the English version, at least, it's 2 minutes and 45 seconds of solid text. So we skip all that. In fact, we skip ever talking to the water dragon at all until after we're done with the cistern.
Important to select file 2 nice and early there, because if you keep file 1 selected, you'll talk to Fi and then you'll crash. So
yeah, that's no good.
Also, collecting a rupee here with file 1 to load the scale in.
In the old route, you could actually shoot the slingshot to load the water dragon scale in, but due to minor differences in our file setup, I think that was decent timing.
That looked early to me. I'm a little worried about that.
I am also slightly worried.
Oh, looks good. And you can see that he had. You can see how close he was there to the to hitting the wrong spot. So he did land in the basement, though.
And Deesh has triggered the Zelda cutscene again. He's gonna have to go back and do the whole thing for a 4th time now.
I wonder if he knows that you don't need to press A when flapping your left wing. The only A press you need is 1 to open the file select and then 1 to open the door. Although it is convenient to use the Triforce on the main screen to line up whether or not you're going straight forward in your dive.
I just do the whole trick from the file select, so I end up on like the 3rd text box at the end of it. Anyway, you'll see on Chimera's screen that he has gotten the Blessed Idol, and he reloaded the area by going into and out of the statue, and now this high flip here is a trick that we can use to get a little bit of extra height out of a backflip. And that is enough to get him onto the toes of the statue and go out of bounds to reach this rope. That's actually important because the way you're normally supposed to get there requires the whip, and we don't have the whip yet. So now we're going to do this long, slow climb up this rope, and he's going to get caught by at least 1 Bokoblin.
Should only be 1. Looks like he had a decent bomb placement.
Yeah.
It only saves about a second to place a bomb there.
Yeah. Alright, so he's got the boss key, he's up at the upper level now, and we're going to head to get the whip. Because we do need the whip to beat Koloktos and get to the top of the dungeon quickly. But in order to get the whip, we're going to need a small key, because amusingly enough, the boss key, the whip is in a room which is locked from the other side.
Also a reminder that the only reason we need to do any of this is because Imprisoned 2 crashes without beating Ancient Cistern.
Yep, that's it. Although, I was reading through the normal mode any percent route the other day,
Good
and I
name.
believe that route skips the Ancient Cistern. And does some RBM voodoo to set a flag so you can fight the Imprisoned 2 anyway.
Chimera refusing to point his Wii remote at the screen.
That still get you on these combination locks. This one isn't too bad. I hate the one in Sandship.
Yeah, for some reason, the combination lock in Sandship is really awkward to input.
The down slashes are kind of a pain. And the one in... Yeah, going from down to up is what I mean. So the one in Sandship has 2 of those, and it's just kind of annoying.
I find the slashing down to up and then right to left is really hard.
Yeah. Alright, let's see if Deesh can land it this time.
Yeah, Deesh has got it this time.
Gotta be careful with his health here. Okay, he'll be fine. You need at least 4 hearts going into the Koloktos fight to do the fastest strat, which requires 2 bombs. And taking 2 hearts of damage.
Water is also the fastest way to take damage in this game. When you drown in hero mode, you can go from the instant that you start drowning to dying is probably about 10 seconds.
Yeah, it's really fast.
It's crazy fast. It's used a lot at 100% to damage down.
Yeah, and it's to the point where if you are in water and you make a mistake, you're pretty much dead.
Yeah, it's super crazy. Didn't happen though, so thankfully we don't have to worry about it for Chimera, and hopefully we don't have to worry about it for Deesh.
One other interesting facet of the drowning, which probably won't come up here, but when you're drowning for a little while and then refill your air, there's essentially a timer that ticks down between each hit you take from drowning. That timer is preserved even if you get more air and then start drowning again. So if you are like about to die and grab an air bubble and then you start drowning again, you'll die instantly because that timer is still almost empty.
Yeah, that's one of those really weird things that doesn't come up very often, that once in a while get someone's like, oh yeah, that's a thing.
Alright, so Deesh is remembering to get the water here. Bonking the waterfall to set the flag, so he should be able to get to Fire Sanctuary now. Chimera, just a second ago, did a series of hops to reach this lower level of the statue without taking damage. You can get here with a backflip, but you'll take damage because it's high enough to deal fall damage and you don't have the sailcloth. But by doing that sort of sequence of hops, you can make it so that Link grabs the edge and that cancels the fall damage you would normally take. And again, that's important because we want to have at least 4 hearts going into this boss fight.
This boss fight is also one of the largest elements of RNG in all of Skyward Sword. So we need Koloktos to do a pretty specific attack. He's got 3 attacks that he can do. 2 of them are bad, 1 of them is good. And sometimes he's just a jerk.
Yeah. We say it's one of the biggest RNG elements. It's actually not that bad. Like, you won't lose too much time over it, but you can definitely lose...
Oh, you can lose up to a minute.
I have never even come close to that.
I have lost a minute.
Never even come close to it.
I say one of the biggest. It's really also one of the only. There's very little RNG in Skyward Sword as a whole.
Yeah. That part at least is nice.
Yeah, Deesh finally making his way into Fire Sanctuary. He is nice and safe from the grips of the RBM beforehand.
He has some catching up to do, but he has done Ballad of the Goddess skip and Song of the Hero skip, and Chimera still has to do those. So he's not quite as far behind as it looks, but he is gonna need to catch up. So the Koloktos fight in the first phase, you want to get all of his arms pulled off first. So you got a good attack there. Once you've got all his arms pulled off, you plant a couple bombs and blow yourself up. And that also deals all the damage you need to get through Koloktos' first phase.
Exactly enough, actually. He's got 80 health and each bomb does 40.
Yep. So yeah, that's third attack he did, where he took his arms off of his weak point. That's the one we need at that point. And that's where he can do different attacks, which will waste time. There's actually a fast strat, well, kind of a fast strat for the first phase that doesn't use bombs, so you can avoid taking damage. But it's about 15 seconds slower than the bomb strat.
And then Koloktos' second phase is a bit of a joke, because his first attack is always the same, and then with 2 simple Skyward strikes, he's dead. So kind of reminiscing about this incredibly overpowered Skyward strikes again.
Yep. And you notice you have to be a little bit careful with your Skyward strike. You can hit the various parts of his body that you lopped off with the giant sword, so...
Yeah, if he's surrounded by him, you'll have to do Skyward stabs, which do exist, believe it or not. Skyward stabs are actually high enough to go over top of all of his equipment.
Mm-hmm. They're surprisingly helpful in different places. We may see that again during one of the endgame fights.
Yes.
Chimera rolling under the heart container. We don't want that because we're about to do more RBM.
Yeah, I hope you didn't. I hope you missed RBM.
It's hard to miss RBM in the run. Yeah. It's a bit ubiquitous. Alright, so Deesh is doing his Fire Sanctuary RBMs, I believe.
I think he's on his second one.
He's heading for Oriel and Pero's Crystal. This will give him the bird statue inside Fire Sanctuary.
Chimera meeting this random dragon that we've never seen before.
Yeah, this is the water dragon's one appearance.
Only appearance of any of the dragons in any percent, actually. The one skip that we keep talking about, Song of the Hero skip, skips seeing any of the dragons and doing all of their quests. And, of course, getting Song of the Hero.
Yes. It also notably skips the Skyloft Trial and Skykeep as well.
Yes.
There are 7 dungeons in this game. We completely skipped 3 of them. I say completely. Technically, we go into the Linear Mining for 2 seconds.
Doesn't count.
Doesn't count. Alright, so Deesh has got his ferry. He's setting up for the reverse bit warp now.
Interesting to note, the positioning for this is so precise that if you just do the 2 side hops and then the 2 backflips, your positioning is wrong. You actually need to press C before Link kind of settles into place in order to prevent him from moving backwards or forwards. Sorry.
And you see Deesh redid that setup because he wasn't satisfied with where he ended up. This is another advantage of the NTSC 1.0 version of this trick. You don't need a precise setup there because you actually use a different statue completely. You use the Bazaar statue with a bit save during this trick. So that's another nice little benefit.
Chimera, thankfully not having a problem with his statue inside Fire Sanctuary. If your RBM for some reason didn't work, you're kind of porked at this point.
You have to redo the water basin skip, if I remember right.
Yes. And you also have to get there somehow, which is kind of the really slow part.
I should point out at this point, Deesh is running the English version, but he's not doing any of the English-only things I mentioned, because he actually has the NTSEU 1.1 version, which patched the cistern clip. That we
I actually didn't know that he had 1.1.
Yeah, he does not have 1.0, and therefore he has sort of the worst of both worlds. He doesn't get the cool version exclusive glitch, and he has to watch English text the whole time.
Poor Deesh.
Poor Deesh, indeed. Chimera is doing the last RBM in Fire Sanctuary here. This is the second part of the Mogmamit skip, and it involves just looking at the Bazaar statue. It's actually the fastest RBM in the route. And we're going to commit it by getting a ferry from a pot here which will also be helpful for safety in the endgame.
So what that RBM actually did was kill the Moldorm that's in this room here. So this is where the boss key is, and to get the boss key, you kill the Moldorm, and then the gate opens, and each one of those things has a flag associated to it, and so we need to RBM them both. Because if you RBM one and you walk into the room, then it'll actually unset.
And that's why it's a 2-part RBM, to skip the Mogma Myths instead of 1. But everything went well for Chimera in Fire Sanctuary, so he's headed to Girheim 2. Deesh, meanwhile, is heading towards Ancient Cistern to do his reverse bit warp. We still haven't seen the two routes coincide yet.
Chimera is coming up on the convergence point, though.
Yes, he
So
should
it
be
is
doing...
looking like Chimera is ahead.
Yes, for certain, I think. He will need to do Ballad of the Goddess skip and Song of the Hero skip pretty much right after this fight. So the Girheim 2 fight isn't too bad. The second part's a little bit random. We basically want to avoid attacks which have darts associated to them.
Deesh chose to shoot the slingshot there.
Yeah, he's using a slightly different route where we're able to do that version of loading the Water Dragon scale in. Chimera's out of stamina, but thankfully got a nice attack to deal with that.
Yeah, that could have been bad.
You want to not take damage here, because even though you have a fairy, you're trying to save that for the end game. Deesh is going through the poison here, and you notice he's entering the Wii menu. He's doing a trick called brake sliding, where by getting some forward momentum and then moving into ESS position backwards and holding Z, you're able to maintain that forward momentum as you go through either sand or the poison there, or even just on flat ground. That's a fancy little backflip from Deesh
Never
there.
seen that before. Chimera with a pretty solid fight.
That statue lowering, by the way, is another place where instant death. Taking
He's
the
choosing
time
to show off the falling Stallmaster.
Very nice, very nice. There are 2 Stallmasters in this game. We fight 0 of them.
Yeah, that's down from previous any percent where we fight them both.
Actually, English only ever fought 1.
Ah, this is true.
Thanks to the Cistern clip.
Although English 1.1 fought both.
Yes, I should say English 1.0 never fought the one in Cistern.
Yeah. RBM actually changed this game so much that 100% doesn't fight either of them anymore either.
Yeah, the old any percent route, Cistern clip was actually very significant. It saved about 5 or 6 minutes over the Japanese version in this dungeon. But with RBM and the advent of this Cistern reverse bit warp, the time save from Cistern clip is down to about 40 seconds to a minute.
Chimera now working his way onto Imprison 2, so that'll kind of be our last thing of the run before Horde and Girheim and so on.
He's gonna have to do Ballad first, right?
Ah, yes. Forgot.
And then Imprison 2. With a Song of the Hero skip thrown in for kicks.
Yeah, I forgot about that too. Different routes.
So it looks like he's setting up to go to Farron back in time. So my guess is he's doing Ballad skip right now.
Yeah, we never actually mentioned it, but you need to load the sky somehow in Back in Time, and so we choose to do that by a bit saving file too.
That loads the ability to call your Loftwing, right? I think that's what that bit save does.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's how we get to the sky. Because otherwise, if you just jump off a platform, the knight places you back on Skyloft. But because you're in back in time, it's this weird glitch cutscene.
Yeah. You also need to select file 2 to go into the sky. If you do select a different file, then you won't crash, but it'll be in a really weird state where you're on Skyloft and flying the Loftwing.
Actually, if you have file 1 or 3 selected, I'm pretty sure you crash. But if you select file 2 too early,
Yes.
that's what causes you to fly around Skyloft. And if you're in that state, you can actually fly over near the windmill, one of the windmills in the village, and hit a loading zone, which will take you into the sky.
Yeah, my bad.
So the reason we do it the way we do it is so that we don't have to go fly to that zone. We essentially use file 1 or 3 to load us into the sky directly, but then during the fade out, we have to select file 2 to avoid crashing.
Now Deesh is doing a death warp back to the center statue. So Deesh accidentally took damage, or he was at 2 hearts, and so he opted to take a death warp instead of a slower Galactos.
Yeah, and here's Chimera's doing ballad skip. He's making his way into the sealed temple. You'll notice it's a slightly different version than what Deesh did earlier, but the end result is the same. So we've raised the gate of time. That's the whole reason we do that trick, because if you don't raise the gate of time, you can't get to the past, and you can't beat the game. Yeah, and that death warp that Deesh did is possibly faster, because you can die after the small key and avoid all the movement back to the main room, and it's shorter movement coming back from that statue that he saved at.
It's also much, much safer, because if you die, you'd be put back in Fire Sanctuary.
Yeah. That is yet another advantage of the NTSC version of this clip. You save anyway and are able to death warp out of the basement, and you don't have to worry about ending up back in Fire Sanctuary. Because the way a bit warp or a reverse bit warp essentially works is it puts you in the new area with the new coordinates, but it doesn't update your spawn points. And so if you were to die after doing a bit warp but before saving or going through some sort of loading zone, you will end up where you started the bit warp. And so since our reverse bit warp into Cistern starts in Fire Sanctuary, dying anywhere before saving sends you all the way back there, and you have to do the whole reverse bit warp again. Thankfully, Cistern is not that threatening a dungeon, so it's not too much of an issue.
That reverse bit warp in particular, though, is one of the slowest back in times in the entire game.
Yeah.
Because you have to get all the way into the depths of Farron.
And its slowness is only superseded by the slowness of the water dragon text. Which is why we do the trick. Alright, so Chimera is attempting to do Song of the Heroes skip. The gates have locked for him, but he should be able to select file 2 to open up those gates.
Yeah.
But I think he's mind-gamed himself out of that, so he's loading file 3 to redo the bit.
Yeah, he could have selected a statue with file 2. If he didn't load file 2's flags, that would have worked. But back in time is complicated, so I can't blame him for just wanting to restart.
Yeah, like if something goes wrong, rather than trying to think your way through it on the spot, it's usually better to just restart and try again.
Yeah, unless you're like Copernicus or somebody who knows everything about back in time.
Unless you know exactly what you're doing, it's usually better to just cut your losses. Alright, so let's see, Deesh is doing Galactos here.
Oh, nice.
Oof.
Ooh, I've never seen that before. Going forwards instead of backwards.
He also
go ahead.
He also got the good attacks, so he gets to do the bomb strat right away.
Yeah, we never mentioned it, but during the good attack, they actually whipped Galactos, and that manipulated his next attack so that we could place down the bombs with ease.
Yeah, because even at that point, he can do an attack, which would be bad for us. We need him at that point to do his big charge-up attack, where he throws his little axe boomerangs around the room. And so whipping him during that attack, for whatever reason, guarantees that he will do the attack we want.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. I don't know why that is.
I don't know why it is either, I just know it works.
Do you know who found that?
I think it was SVA.
That seems like an SVA thing to find.
SVA did a lot of work on this game, particularly when RBM came out. He's the current world record holder with a time of 2:09:22.
He held his iconic 5:01:44 for a long time.
Yes. He found a lot of the strats that we use, even now that RBM has changed the run quite a bit. Alright, so Deesh has finished Cistern. He'll be flying back to Fire Sanctuary to finish up that dungeon. Chimera, I believe, is in the middle of Song of the Hero skip. So once he finishes that, he'll be able to start the Imprisoned 2 fight. And I think it's safe to say that Chimera does have a significant lead now.
Yeah, Imprisoned 2 is where the routes will converge. So the time difference between Chimera getting to Imprisoned 2 and Deesh getting to Imprisoned 2 is how far apart they are.
Yep. And just sort of eyeballing it right now, knowing Deesh still has to do in Fire Sanctuary, I'd say we've got about probably 6 minutes or so for Chimera right now.
5.
It's a significant lead. However, the end game is pretty difficult because we essentially jump from the middle of the game to the very end of the game where they're throwing everything they have at you. And we have limited health going into the end game, even with the fairy we picked up. So it is very possible to die on either the Horde or Demise or really any of the end game fights.
Yeah. 6 Heart Horde is very difficult.
It is
You're
scary.
basically guaranteed to take 1 hit at the end, so you've got really only 1 unintentional hit to work with.
Something has gone wrong for Chimera here. He's leaving Farron Woods to try and reload. I think he just entered Farron Woods with the wrong file initially. So we're going to keep a close eye on the cutscene and see if it starts here.
Yeah,
I
looks
think
good.
that looked good, yeah.
That was a nice save.
Yeah, sometimes when you enter a loading zone with the wrong file, you can undo it.
Sometimes you'll crash if you go back out, though, so...
Yeah. I think he's trying to figure out...
I'm not sure what he's doing.
He might not think it worked. Yeah, he's resetting.
Yeah, he's doing it again.
Yep. I think we're both pretty sure that that would have worked for him.
Yeah, that looked good to me. That definitely looked good to me.
Yeah.
Also, you can just retry it later, so I would have gone with it and then come back and see if it worked.
Yeah. Again, I'm not fully familiar with the route that Chimera is doing, so it's possible there's some subtlety that I'm missing, but from what I can see, he got a successful Song of the Hero skip and then backed out of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there.
This will give Deesh a chance to catch up a little bit.
Yeah, that's significantly reduced the leads. So they're probably pretty close now, actually.
Yeah, I think Chimera's still in the lead because the Song of the Hero skip is probably about 3 to 4 minutes. But that his lead is significantly reduced.
Farron bit, even just getting to Farron in Back in Time takes a very long time. Takes a couple of minutes.
It takes about 2 minutes from starting a bit to reaching Farron.
Yeah.
And then he's got about a minute movement through Farron to get to the woods where he can do the trick.
Yeah, Deesh making his way through Fire Sanctuary, thankfully also not having any problems with the statue there. Grabbing his fairy, working towards the boss key.
Yeah, so what Jace pointed out is that
yes.
Chimera spawned in a place he wasn't expecting because he forgot to bit save file 1 during the back in time. So the back in time worked. Like we're pretty sure Song of the Hero skip would have worked for him, but because he spawned in the wrong location, he got thrown off. and assumed that the trick didn't work.
Yeah,
So
or
he's-
just didn't know what to do and opted to redo it again instead of risking messing something up.
Yeah, it's sort of the similar strategy of what we said. If something goes wrong with a bit, it's usually better to just bail out and try again. This is one of those odd situations where that's not true. He would have been better served to just try and keep going. He also had some rough movement there on Skyloft, so he's losing more time, and it's going to be pretty even here.
Mm-hmm.
Heading to Imp 2. We haven't talked very much about the Imprisoned 2 fight itself yet, but it's actually probably the hardest fight in the run. There's a very cool and quick strategy where you can get essentially all the hits on him in sort of one cycle, but it's tricky to pull off.
Yeah, I mentioned this, or kind of hinted at it a long time ago when I said back in Fire Temple that cutscenes not starting while Link is in the air is going to be important again, and that's where it is.
Yeah. The reason I mention it is because when Chimera had like a 5 or 6 minute lead, he had a pretty decent cushion where even if he messes up in 2 fight, he will probably still be ahead. That cushion I think is now gone. So if Chimera has a bad Imp 2 fight and Deesh does not, we could see this flip pretty easily.
Yeah, you can lose upwards of a minute on Imprisoned 2. And that's assuming you have a good, bad Imprisoned 2.
Yeah, that's assuming you sort of get the backup strats the way you want them. You can have Imprisoned 2 fights that actually game over if they go bad enough. That's pretty rare now, but it could theoretically happen.
Yeah.
So this is probably still anyone's race at this point.
Yeah, looking like we're quite close.
Chimera is, I think, still in the lead, assuming this Song of the Hero skip goes the way he expects it to. Looks good again. So I think part of what threw him off is that he wasn't sure how to trigger the Imprisoned 2 fight from spawning inside Sealed Ground, the Sealed Temple here. Whereas if he runs in here, he can trigger the fight like he normally does. But when he spawned inside the Sealed Temple, Imper was in a different position and Groose wasn't here. So I think he didn't really know how to deal with that. I think if he had just left the temple and gone back in, he would have been fine. But that's really hard to tell in the moment. Alright, Deesh is bidding his way out of Fire Sanctuary. You'll notice he used the fairy before hitting the flame wall, because if he doesn't do that, the fairy's just going to revive him, and it will take him longer to do the death he needs. He's probably going to do an RBM that will help him start the Imp 2 fight earlier. It's possible to actually set that flag during Back in Time in such a way that you skip a lot of the text that's around that particular fight. So he's also going to be doing a Farron bit here.
In particular, you skip the text that Chimera is going through right now.
Yes. And that's a bigger deal on English again than the Japanese version. And this route that Chimera is doing doesn't do that trick because it's actually not really faster on the Japanese version.
Oh, Chimera just barely managing to hit the Imprisoned 2's fingers. So that's so that you can make it up in the air vent there. And now time for the tricky trick. So I've been calling this spike trick lately. I don't think it actually has a name. But with a clever jump slash, you can hit the Imprisoned spike in and also be in the air at the same time. So then the game doesn't put Link in the about to fall off of Imprisoned 2's head state, which means that you just don't fall off of Imprisoned 2's head. And Chimera actually got it both times, so he's going to have a perfect fight here.
Yes, this is exactly what you want out of the Imprisoned 2 fight. And so Chimera will not only preserve whatever lead he has, put pressure on Deesh, even though Deesh won't know it, to have a similarly perfect Imp 2 fight.
I think Deesh is actually listening to us, so...
Oh. No pressure.
Yeah. Good luck, Deesh.
He's got to get through this RBM first, and this is one of those RBMs where it's actually to crash your console. So he's got to maneuver over to the sealed temple door here with file 1 as his active file, which it is right now because he just bit saved it. And then he's got to select file 3, but in order to do that safely, he has to hold the Z button. Selecting file 3 lets him open the temple door, and then he wants to select file 1 while he's entering it in order to load the correct flags. So he's all set with that. And now by charging a Skyward Strike on this little pedestal here and holding the Z button and selecting file 1, we'll start this cutscene. So he skipped sort of the first part of this text, and now he's able to start his file at the right time to trigger the Imprisoned 2 fight. And because he bit saved out in the sealed grounds, he'll just have to jump down and start the fight immediately.
Yeah, and once again, this is a story flag, so we actually have to RBM the flag itself. We can't RBM some other thing on some other map.
So I would put Chimera's lead at about 2 minutes right now.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I like this little side hop that both Chimera and Deesh did. It's a little bit slower, but it preserves 2 hearts. And ideally, you don't heal for the rest of the game. So the hearts we have right now, including the fairy in the back, are all the hearts we have for the rest of the run.
Deesh missing the Imprisoned 2's fingers there, so he's going to have to go to the nice and far vent. He can still make it back to the Imprisoned's head to do the trick, but it's going to be real hard now.
Yeah, those fingers at the beginning are important just to get on his head as quickly as possible. If you miss it, you can still break the fingers.
It looks like he's waiting until the Imprisoned grabs. He could have made it onto the head, but I guess, I don't know.
Yeah.
He didn't want to.
It's a little tricky because when the Imprisoned reaches this specific point, he'll start this wall climbing animation. And if you're on his head at that point, you'll fall off. So it's a little bit risky to try and get there. He had time to do it, but he would have had to be pretty quick about his jump slash strat. And really, the jump slash right now is the more important part. Staying on his head rather than getting on his head as fast as possible. Although that cutscene is pretty slow.
Oh, Deesh standing a little too far to the left there, going to miss with his jump slash, so he's going to be thrown off his head.
Deesh told me before the run that he was not feeling confident about Imp 2, so it seems that's sadly coming to fruition here.
I don't think anyone's ever confident about Imp 2.
No, that's true.
No matter how much Imp 2 you do, you can unfortunately still fail it.
Alright, Chimera's gonna sit on the stool for his extra 2 hearts of health for that extra bit of safety on the end game. And now we see if Song of the Hero skip worked.
Nice.
And it did. So
Now,
Chimera just has to get through the end game bosses and he will have this ring.
little fun fact, the cutscene that Chimera just skipped actually is a soft lock. But since we're playing on hero mode, we can skip it. Ooh!
Ooh, Deesh just missed the head.
He's pausing the game for a second there. I'm not sure what that was about.
I think that's frustration, actually. I think he's a little bit frustrated with how the water basin skip went and how this Imp 2 fight is going.
Yeah, completely understandable.
Yeah. Alright, so Chimera's going through the horde here. The first barrier, you have to kill the 4 blue bandana goblins. And then... same trouble for Deesh, she's a little too far to the left. This barrier has a famous trick called Horde Skip. So the Moblin's going to spawn in the corner here, and if Chimera runs at the right angle, he'll be able to run up the shield and jump over that side barrier, which was well done. I thought he was almost not making it over that gate, but he had just enough height.
His angle was a little worrying for me, actually, honestly, there.
Yeah, so he's successfully skipped both the second and third barrier. The third barrier has the blue Bokoblin, which has like infinite health. So it's a really good skip to get. Not just for the speed, but it also makes the fight a little safer, because this is a fight where it's very easy to take a lot of damage fast. As you can see, Chimera has lost all of his first 7 hearts and he's down to his fairy.
Deesh finally completing Imprison 2. Very unfortunate fight. Too bad.
Yeah, the combination of Chimera's perfect M2 and Deesh's struggles here have probably doubled Chimera's lead.
Yeah, but Chimera, again,
Although,
hasn't taken the basically guaranteed 2 hearts at the end, so he still has to be very careful, because if he takes 1 hit, it's very likely that he'll die on the way to Girahim. And with that, the Stalfos is dead, so he should be good now.
yeah, so these 2 hearts coming up are from these Bokoblin archers. There's 3 sets of 4 right at the end, and it's possible to weave through them without getting hit, but it's tricky.
Oh, it looks like he's going to be playing it nice and safe and did a phenomenal job managing to avoid all damage.
Yep, that's well done. If you're trying to go as fast as possible there, you more or less hug the left wall
And hope for the best.
and hope for the best. And you're almost guaranteed to get hit if you do that. So if you have the health to manage it, and you're trying to go as fast as you possibly can, then you do it. Or you can play it a little safe and try to juke them out. Alright, so he's successfully through the Horde. That's the scariest part, because the Horde is the longest fight to redo. Now, even if he dies, he'll spawn before whichever fight he died on.
Yeah, it's quite safe now. Slightly faster to jump down with Girahim, so that your final blows here don't take as long to hit.
Mm-hmm. And
Doesn't
it's
look as
important
cool,
to
though.
note that we didn't pick up a shield at the beginning of the run, so we got this without a shield.
Not too bad for the most part, though, because you can pretty much just backflip instead of shield bash.
Yeah, for me, it's the second phase of this fight where not having a shield hurts the most. Because there's a nice strat there which involves shield bashing, but there's also a pretty nice strat involving Skyward stabs, which is just a little more challenging to get. So we'll see what Chimera does when he finishes knocking Girahim down a few pegs.
Deesh also in the middle of a really long cutscene, unfortunately.
Yeah. If we keep in mind the text differences here, though, I think Chimera's lead is around 5 minutes right now. So Deesh may end up finishing within that time range.
Chimera, unfortunately, having a bit of a fumble there with the Skyward Stab strat.
So I think the issue he had there is that his second Skyward Stab actually hit Girahim with the sword as well, and that triggers him to jump back. So what you want to do with that second Skyward Stab is back up enough that when you do the stab, you only hit with the Skyward part of it and not the actual sword. And that re-stuns him so that you can deliver the last few stabs.
Yeah, or you could do one fewer stab and go for the double hit, but you're crazy if you do that.
That sounds crazy.
Yes.
Alright, Chimera is entering the Demise fight.
Yeah, Demise is a very scripted fight, but it's also very easy to make a mistake, especially in the second phase of the fight, where if you make a mistake, then it can be it can actually be kind of tricky to kill Demise.
Yeah, basically the stuns you have in the first phase can carry over to the second phase. So if you get the right combination at the beginning of the second phase, it's very fast. But if you mess it up, you have to essentially stun him 3 times all over again, and that's a fair amount of time. Chimera going for the backflip slash strats. You backflip and then slash while you're in the air, and you'll do a jump attack forward when you land. It's a nice clean way of dealing with that first phase.
Ooh, going with the double backflip off the start strat. I personally hate this strat, but it seems like everyone else likes it.
I prefer the double backflip dodge strat, where you dodge 2 of his attacks with backflips.
It's also my preferred method.
This worked just fine for him. Congrats to
238.10.
Chimera. Chimera wins this winner's bracket race. He'll be moving on, I believe, to face Lepalog in his next match. And Deesh will be dropping down to loser's bracket, where he'll have to wait for a couple other races to finish before he knows who he's racing next.
Pretty close race throughout, though.
Yeah, that was very close. In the end, I think the water basin skip is what did Deesh in.
Oh, Deesh. So he had a very rare occurrence there where a Bokoblin throws a bomb in such a position where if you do the horde skip like you normally would, you'd actually just pick up the bomb. So he had to kind of do a different thing and hope for the best, and unfortunately it didn't work out for him there.
And he's in even worse straits here because the Moblins didn't die in the bomb explosions. And so he's
very bad luck there. I don't think I've ever seen such bad luck there, actually.
This is what the Horde can do to you, and this is why this run is really not over. It's over. In the old route, we used to get 9 hearts, and if you wanted to be safe, you'd pick up a fairy. So you had a fair amount of health in reserve.
And you had the sailcloth, so you didn't have to worry about taking the 2 hearts after horde skip.
Right, that too. And you didn't even have the Imprisoned 2 fight right before, so you would be at full health going into the Horde.
Yeah. Also, it really didn't lose time to pick up a fairy since you had to get it in whatever the last dungeon in this game is. Skykeep, and it looks like Deesh actually forfeited at the end here.
Yeah, he is not going to finish this race. So good run from both runners.
What's up?
Hello. GG.
GG's.
Congratulations.
That was an interesting run.
Yeah, this was a very interesting race. Like I said earlier, for the most part, it was quite close, but unfortunately, some nunchuck troubles on your part and some water troubles on Deesh's part.
Welcome, Deesh. GG.
You mean brain troubles?
Brain troubles can happen sometimes.
That's not brain troubles. That's like existential crisis troubles. I'm genuinely so mad.
I'd say overall it was a pretty solid race, pretty close.
Yeah.
It was actually a pretty fantastic run aside from that and the, what was it? I failed the God of Sword RBM.
Yes.
That would have been like 225 pace or something. Aside from that and Imprisoned 2, which I really need to practice.
Imprisoned 2 is a difficult fight for sure.
Yeah.
So Chimera, take us through your run. What were you thinking at different points?
I was really nervous at the beginning, and then once I died like 4 or 5 times, I was just like laughing because of how comically bad the run was.
What was going through your mind? Or sorry, continue.
I was just thinking like how fun it is for the viewers to see this train wreck.
Yeah, as I recall, you had some issues with the Deep Woods, and it's funny how having a death or something like that happen can actually calm you down a little bit.
Yeah. I'm not super consistent at the cube warp, so I was kind of hoping to get extending blow.
Yeah, I noticed you retried it a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did
you feel like you were behind or ahead for most of the run? Like, how did you feel like you were doing in relationship to the race?
Well, actually, Deesh and I were in a voice call, so
I see.
I knew basically where he was. But I felt like I was behind most of the first hour because I kept getting issues with my nunchuck, and I kept losing time because of it, and all the deaths and all that.
Yeah. It was difficult comparing you in the middle because you did end up using different routes. I think you were doing the newest route that
Yeah.
skips the 2 RBM, whereas Deesh was still doing that route, which, as I recall, is a little bit faster on the with English text. So once you got to the Goddess Harp, your routes kind of diverged there, so it was a little hard to compare you up to that
Yeah.
point.
Must have been interesting to see both English and Japanese doing different routes.
It for me, it was a little painful seeing the text side by side, but it was also interesting to see the differences in the two routes and just how they're organized differently.
Yeah. Well, I think what was really interesting at the beginning was seeing the deaths on Japanese still being faster than English.
Yeah.
So what happens now, George?
Oh, sorry, my mic was off. Let me just double check. I was like starting to talk, and then suddenly, like, I was like, huh, why aren't we responding? And why isn't my thing lighting up in the Discord? But yeah, that's it. Thank you for running. Thank you for commentating. It was an awesome match. And
Yeah, it was a
yeah,
fun race to watch.
and Deesh is not out of the tournament yet. Deesh still has a fight to go in the losers bracket, so don't think
Yep.
you'll be seeing less of him.
And Chimera, I think you're up against Lepalog next, if I remember right.
I think so, yeah.
That sounds
How
right.
do you feel about that race going forward?
I'll probably be nervous like I was earlier, and I'll die a few times, and then, I'll feel good, I suppose.
Yeah, I feel like in this race you had a pretty solid sort of second half of the run. Like everything second half onward was pretty good.
Yeah. I'm kind of sad that I did so well on Prison 2 because I failed the Song of the Hero skip right before.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware I could save it, so I just attempted it again.
Yeah, that's hard to figure out in the moment for sure.
Yeah.
Because like we were saying, anytime you're doing a back in time and something goes wrong, it's usually better to just start it over again rather than try to figure out if you can save it.
Yeah. That was one of the ones that probably loses you a lot of time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the longer ones for sure. Well, we'll be looking forward to your race against Lepalog coming up sometime, and Deesh, you're gonna have to wait for a couple of races, I think, but we'll look forward to your next race as well.
Yeah. Well, I can do some all dungeons and 100% and stuff in the meantime.
Yes, 100%. Good caveat.
I will put a shout out for the 100% route. It's a lot of fun.
Actually, I very well may not run any percent again until my next tournament match.
Sometimes it's just good to put a race away for a minute. Yeah, put a route away and come back to it later.
Breaks do magic. Breaks are magic.
Yeah. I feel like every time I take a little hiatus, my first run back, I play like amazing because
Mhm.
That's
I don't
true.
know, I'm not overthinking things or anything like that.
I can relate.
All right, so I think we're done, right?
Yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to race.